All right, my friend, we're recording, so thank you. Thank you for coming
Thank
on.
you, Greg. Thank you.
So, why don't you go ahead, Mike? Go ahead and introduce yourself and give everyone kind of the quick bio, link.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I'm Mike Manion, and I am a retired military guy, 22 years, Army E8, First Sergeant, Master Sergeant, whatever you want to call it. I retired from military service in 2013 after 22 years of combined service with the Army, the Air Force Reserve, and eventually the Army component again. During my time in service, I was fortunate to be a lot of different places around the world and see a lot of different things. But unfortunately, some of those things that I participated in and was privy to left me with the lovely parting gift of some PTSD, anxiety, and some other things to deal with once I left service. I retired in 2013, and roughly 5 years later, I was damn near 300 pounds. I was drinking uncontrollably, riding around with a motorcycle gang, eating chicken wings, and just totally disconnected from myself, my family, my whole existence. And it was all just kind of the way that it had manifested on me and started crashing down. It was just, looking back at all the things that I knew to be true versus what most of the people thought were true. And it was just a reconciliation of so many different emotional things. And, from my childhood and everything else, that all kind of came crashing down. And I needed something different than what the VA had to offer. A lot of times with the veterans, when we go decide that we can want to get some help, the help that they give you is not adequate. We're talking about, the death pill cocktail and some of the other things that we know are not effective. For me, myself, when I got to that point where I was finally ready to make a transition into a more positive life, I happened to discover plant medicine. And that was 4 years ago. 2020. I did my very first plant medicine ceremony, which was mushrooms. And then the next day we did Bufo, which is what I currently work with, Bufo alvarius. In that very first night of ceremony, 48, 49 years worth of unprocessed emotions all in one night. And man, I cried like a baby all night long and, reviewed some things and reviewed them again and cried some more. And it was just, it was an amazing, beautiful, ugly, horrible, mystical thing, but at the end of the day, every last range of the gamut of emotions and things that I had tried to quantify my whole life, just in that 4 hours, it really came into fruition for me. And it was because I think that for me personally, I certainly was somebody who was already different, types of answers, and I was ready for that. I think that, sometimes, the folks that I work with now, I'll tell them that a lot of times a guy simply has to be tired of his own shit,
Yeah,
before they before they move in a different
yeah,
direction, because, 9 times out of 10, everybody around you is already tired of your shit, but you just haven't smelt it yet, so it's that kind of thing. But the medicines, what they allow you to do is to sit with those emotions, sit with those dark parts of you and see where they come from, understand where they come from. And for me, that's exactly what I needed. That mushroom ceremony that night was followed by a Bufo ceremony in the morning. And Bufo alvarius, I don't know how much folks know about it, but it is a very, very powerful medicine. And it's DMT, dimethyltryptamine is what it is. It's the same thing that's released by our pineal gland in our brains when we go to sleep at night. To a lesser extent, it's released by our lungs as well. But when we use this
also some
medicine and have that experience, it is absolutely revelatory. It takes you to a place where you can see, feel, and understand, just the vastness of yourself, the universe, and everything. And you understand when you're done with this journey that it's not about just you. I mean, there's something much more bigger at work, for all of us. And, regardless of folks' religious inclinations or beliefs or anything else, we all have to know that there is something higher. Whatever that person calls that is up to them. But there is something outside of ourself that powers all of this, and it brings you back to your own divinity. We've gotten so far away from that as a society in terms of the things that we believe about ourselves, the programming that we take on every single day, and you couple that with just the general nastiness that's out there in the world, and it's no wonder why folks are out here with mental health crises. I mean, we're talking about a situation where with veterans, the numbers are 22 to 50 per day in terms of those who are choosing the act of suicide. And that's just the veterans. In the United States as a whole, we're closer to 1,000 people a day making that decision.
Hold on. I want you to repeat that because you said it so quick. I think that one of the things I do want to make sure is that I find in a lot of podcasts or interviews, people will just kind of glance over the numbers in a way to kind of argue against another side. And I really want somebody to kind of sit with that for a second, like repeat that number just in veterans per day.
Just in veterans, we're looking at a number that fluctuates between 22 and 50
per day.
The accurate numbers, of course, they fluctuate, and then of course you have a system that's not always 100% transparent of what's happening either.
Yeah.
But just to that number again, let's think about the 20-year conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan. In that conflict alone, we're looking at 7,000 to 8,000 folks who lost their lives during that. Now, since then, there's been 30,000 who have lost their lives to suicide. So we're losing more out of battle than we are during that whole 20-year duration. So now you have to think about, why is that, right? Okay, number one, there's not adequate help, right? But number two, what's the other thing that's going on is, why are so many people making that decision? It's because of a lot of the moral injury. Folks will talk about the PTSD, in a lot of different terms, body parts and everything else. But the moral injury of it is what actually gets a lot of folks more so than anything else, because you understand eventually that all those things that you thought that you were doing in the name of America and whatever else were just total atrocities and resource grabs and everything else, So what do you do with that,
Can you explain a little bit more? Because I think some people might not know that what you just explained, like that moral dilemma. That, what did you call it? I like that phrase. When you realize that what you were acting upon wasn't on the moral high ground, but you had a term and I missed it.
Moral injury.
Moral injury, correct. Can you explain more specifically what a moral injury is, or give an example of it? Because I don't think a lot of people too, when they don't understand. Like, I've always said this from someone who's a civilian, not from the military. I don't care whether you want to agree we should be in that conflict or not, and I don't care whether it's a war, insurgent, whatever it is, insurgency. Like, that's not the soldier's fault. Like, when the veterans come home, to be disrespectful or to not take care of them is irrelevant of the fact of whether you believe politically they should have been there or not. Because nobody argues the fact that what makes our country as free as it can be without all the issues that are going on is that we are still a military power. Like, we still have the military might, right? So to be dismissive of it just because you politically disagree with why it was there is irrelevant, right? Like, and that's amazing to me. I never thought about the number that you just said, which means I think a lot of people have missed it. 7,000 to 8,000 lost during the conflict, 30,000 lost after it.
Yes.
So like, if we were to go into the war and they sat in front of the strategy room where they said, well, we project to lose 37,000 Americans if we go into this war, I think you would reassess going into it versus saying, well, we might lose 5 to 6 and we came out with 7,000 loss. It was acceptable loss.
Yeah.
Right?
What is an acceptable loss, right? When we're talking about human life,
Yeah, well, that's a whole nother thing to say. Okay, right, where are you? But I think it's a staggering thing, and I'm going to repeat it again. 7,000 lost during the conflictive years of war, which spanned 20 years, you said?
Yes.
7,000 lost in 20 years of combat. In the period after, 30,000.
Yes. We have lost more to suicide than we actually did in fighting the battles. Yes.
Yeah, that's a stat. I've never seen that stat or something.
Yes, and I do believe, that the moral injury is a huge part of that, because again, you do eventually come to a level of disengagement, right? So like you said, while you're there in the theater, all the reasons why you're there don't matter. The only thing that matters is getting home safely and not trying to really understand any of it, because at the end of the day, I mean, war's been going on for thousands of years, and at the end of the day, it's always, or usually old men talking and young men dying, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how this thing goes. But in terms of the moral injury, one of the things that I put together very early, I was stationed in Central America when I was a young soldier in the early 90s. I was in Panama, to be exact. And the mission down there, of course, for the United States Army South was the war on drugs. You know, this particular time of the country, Pablo Escobar was still alive right next door in Colombia, right? So if anybody's ever looked at the history of Panama, where we went down there and invaded and took Noriega out of there and then brought him back up here and put him in prison in Miami, you know, when you start digging a little bit deeper, you understand exactly how that happened. You know, Noriega was pretty much put in charge by the American CIA and everything else at one point, and that's because he was their puppet. And then right next door was Escobar. And essentially how it went down is, you know, Escobar got a hold of him some kind of way. It was like, look, man, I'm over here making millions, and you're being controlled by the Americans for what, $500,000 a year? Shit, I'll give you that tomorrow. I'll give you that every day for the rest of your life. If that's what you want.
Yeah.
Right? So
like
right. So then eventually, now all of a sudden, Noriega's a bad guy and he's got to go. And we took the might of the military, went down there and got him, and named one of those who ever sat in military prison or a U.S. prison for something they committed in their country, right? So then you start going a little bit further and you look at the war on drugs, and right there in Panama and between Panama and Colombia, there's a place called the Darien province. It's a huge, thick jungle mass, and there's a lot of clandestine drug activity that goes on out there, processing coca leaves and everything else. So part of the mission for the Americans was just like on that movie in Clear and Present Danger. Sometimes they would go down there and take out those labs or whatever else was happening. You know, those were the busts that we were supposed to have, right? The ones that were supposed to go on TV, right? So then you learn, if we run an analysis of the timeline, now we start talking about a guy named Ollie North and the Iran-Contra and all the other good stuff, and you figure out that, wait a minute, the U.S. government was the one bringing the drugs into the country to fund operations off books and everything else. And it's bad enough that you did that, but where'd you put them? Where'd you put those drugs when you brought them? Oh, I don't know, the black and brown neighborhoods. And then what did we create there? We created a school to pipeline or school to prison pipeline and a whole generation of everybody going to jail for crack and everything else. And wait a minute now, I thought there was a war on drugs. Wait a minute.
Let me ask you a question about this, because being a person who's I feel the same sentiment you, where I felt like when I was younger, if you would have told me this, I'd be like, not the government. Military,
exactly,
right? And then as you get older, as you get older and you work either in corporate America or you meet more people, you're like, wow, people are really out for themselves. And then all these things you start hearing about what's going on in military government, they sound more plausible, because a friend of mine posted something recently where he says, okay, let's just assume, you're not a conspiracy theorist, you don't believe in this, but let's just assume this story of a group of people have all this power, you're one of them. How do you avoid losing the power? What would be the steps you take? And they're eerily just like things we're seeing playing out in front of us. So my question to you, as someone who was in it and came through the actual inside of the military, do you think that it's always been corrupt with the maliciousness? Like when you said, the drugs ends up becoming this pipeline from school to jail, from neighborhood to jail, and they put it in the black and brown neighborhoods. Do you think that's something that was maliciously done, or something where like, holy shit, we just lost control, and once it leaked out there, we couldn't stop it? Like, and then do I take that the next level up? Did they have good intentions when they went in there to put the drugs, or did they purposely flood it in there to get control? Like, at what level did the morality break, or were we corrupted from the founding fathers and getting away from England, where we were screaming we wanted rights? But and I don't want to go off on another rabbit hole, but it has always amazed me, even as a 100% Caucasian person whose lineage is British and traces back to the Mayflower, that no one discusses what we've done to Native Americans in this country in a complete, and I raise a Jewish son, so I'm very aware of historical, like I'm very aware of Holocaust. We don't talk about Holocaust and genocide and complete destruction of entire like society, not just like flooding with drugs or holding our, like we just decimated. We don't even discuss it, right? Like, it's almost amazing. I don't want to jump off on that one, but where do you think we were always corrupt from the beginning? Do you think there was you think from day one, so it's always been
I think from day one. I think if you go back to, I mean, just the concept of manifest destiny, right? I mean, any number of things you can throw out there. Juneteenth. I mean, why didn't the slaves know that they were free for a whole year? I mean, let's go back to the Irish folks that we mentioned. Some of them came over here in indentured servitude type of situations as well, and a lot of them were
Yeah.
highly persecuted and everything else for practicing the old ways, which was basically just herbalism, and they called them witches and burned them. So there's always been something about this country where if
The
you
Asian
just
population that was
yeah,
completely wow.
it's always
From
been something there
West Coast.
about the control, the control over certain
Here,
folks, and then control over everybody.
well, let me go one step back, because this kind of just gave me an epiphany when you said this all the way from the beginning. I'm like, hasn't God? Oh my, I can't believe I say this. America's game the whole time has been a bait and switch. If you think about all the
Yeah,
races that come over, it's been like paved in gold, from the Italians to the Irish to the Asians, being very generalized in the broken order of history. I'm skipping a lot, but if you look at those three demographics that came through, especially Ellis Island, and then throughout, right, like it was Asians eventually being like, hey, it'll be like railroad. It won't be that bad of a job. And then it's like, yeah, we just take all your papers. You're fucked. You're a slave. Like indentured servitude was really just like, God, I don't know if I have a good analogy. It was like, yeah, it's like you're going to have your freedom, but there was no guarantee, and everything was ripped up when you got here. And God forbid you weren't stark, like God forbid you weren't stark white. If there's any thought that you might have been from anywhere else but a European country, your papers were ripped up, and you're right, you were getting right. So it's not even just control. It was like, hey, it was the bait and switch from the beginning. Oh wow. Like even
yeah,
if you think about
absolutely. And all the laws and everything are predicated upon things that are some of it's outrageous, man. I mean, and that's
well, it's
that's
a
the
whole
thing
different
too. Is
life.
like for me, I've always been, I guess, what some would call a closeted nerd. When I grew up in South Central Los Angeles and eventually the Inland Empire in California, but I've always had kind of a very, very inquisitive nature, and I was always somebody who was able to read and understand things at a level that my peers didn't. So it was just always been that kind of a very inquisitive nature. And a lot of times, when I was young, like 10 years old, for a period of about 5 years, I pretty much stopped asking adults questions because I was convinced that no adult around me could articulate what they truly believed about anything to the satisfaction of a 10-year-old. So I quit asking because a lot of my answers were questions were met with anger, especially when you start talking about religion and politics and things like that. Anger shows me that you're just not properly prepared to articulate your stance. So for example, you ask somebody something about the Bible or whatever else. And I grew up, in a Southern Baptist family, so, any question is met with, you don't question the Lord, baby. You don't do that. You're being disrespectful,
But yeah,
and
tell us
no, I'm
more.
not being disrespectful. I'm seeking clarification,
Yeah,
but
tell us more about what's the time what's the time period? Where'd you grow up? What were some of the early things that you saw that or what were some of the things that interested you at that age? Because I was a little bit like that too. I grew up where my father valued education,
Mhm.
but it was a very stringent, like, I'm thankful for it, but I'm like, hey, you could have done this a different way. Like I didn't need, like could have just marked an X on the paper. I didn't need to be,
Yeah,
I didn't need a ruler across the back, like while I was doing them. But I have always valued the fact that education was important. Give us the background, the time period, and then what was your outlook? Where'd you get resources? What were the things that you consider made you nerdy at 10? Yeah.
yeah.
Closeted nerd.
So with I grew up, my mother and father, my mom was 16 years old when I was born, and my dad was 19. Neither of them equipped, to be parents or at that time. However, life goes on, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
in that, I was born in Los Angeles, and lived there in Los Angeles until I was about 7 years old, 6, 7 years old. And then we moved out about 50 miles away from Los Angeles to a place called like San Bernardino County, Inland Empire, but still close to LA. And my grandmother and my family from my father's side were all in LA. So I used to spend a whole lot of time down there. In fact, I didn't want to be in San Bernardino. I wanted to be in LA, you know. But, you know, in terms of the influences that were around me, my mother, when we moved out to that area there, it was because she had got married. You know, she married a guy that was her high school sweetheart, and this was a dude that had went to Vietnam and came back and didn't get any help, you know, from what he experienced over there. And he had a lot of issues, and a lot of those became, you know, drugs and alcohol and everything else. And that's pretty much, you know, what I saw around me. I mean, and now we're talking about basically childhood stuff, right? Because again, you know, with the military, it's like, you know, a lot of people that join the military, and I know this because I was a recruiter, right? So a lot of people that join the military are folks just like myself who came up in a situation that wasn't, you know, 100% great for them, and they were just waiting for a chance to get out the door and run away and go do something else, right? So you know, I use this analogy a lot, but it's true. You know, you leave home with a bag full of shit over your shoulder that's unaddressed, and then you run off to the military, and who knows what happens there. But either way, you come back and you got 2 bags full of shit that are unaddressed, right? So it took me understanding that as an adult, but as a kid, I had no idea what PTSD and all that stuff was. I just knew this guy treated me horribly every single day. You know, that's all I knew. And I knew that, you know, his drug problem made it to the point where I would have to go hide the money from my paper route so he wouldn't steal it. You know, is that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, you start looking for, and again, through all of that, I always had more of a very inquisitive nature, you know, a nature that was very loving and nurturing and just wanting to know more, right? So with him and with the situation around me, it was pretty bad, you know. But my grandfather was an Irishman, right? My grandfather worked in a steel mill and was very, very uneducated in terms of, you know, what the standard would say. You know, he stopped school when he was 12 years old, and he came out to California strictly to work at that steel mill where he found himself. But, you know, very knowledgeable man. And I'll tell you one thing, one story that speaks to kind of how I started learning things was my grandfather. You know, you remember back in the day, I'm talking the 80s time frame is when I grew up, right? 80s, right? So back in the day, remember the folks used to come around and sell those encyclopedias and shit, you know, the Britannicas, right? So granddad had fooled around and bought the whole set. You know, somebody sold it. He would buy anything that somebody would come to the door and try to sell. It was like those guys on that movie Secondhand Lions. That was my granddad. He would buy any damn thing somebody came. We had Kirby's, we had all kind of shit, right?
Oh my
But
Lord.
one day, so I've always been a very avid wrestling fan, right? So Jimmy Superfly Snuka, man, that was my guy back in the day, right? Coming from the top rope with the frog splash and all that shit, right? So I remember I went out to the garage where my grandpa was one day, and I said, Granddad, what do you know about the island of Fiji? I want to know about Fiji, because that's where Jimmy Snuka's from. And he said, I don't know a fucking thing about Fiji, but I know I bought those goddamn books in there that nobody's broken open yet. If you want to know about Fiji, go pick up the one that says F and read it, goddamn it. Like, okay.
Let me tell you something. I have a similar story.
Yeah.
I have a similar story with my dad where we had those, and he knew some things, but I remember I'd asked him something like that, and I got the same answer. What the hell do you think I bought those books for? Go, and he goes, same thing. Go to letter E and look it up. And you tell me. And I'm like, oh, okay. And you know what? It's funny. So in the course of the years that I started to travel, I'd say above 35, and I came into other people I enjoyed being around that were of our, like, you know, of our age demographic and above, where like we were very pre-internet. I always found that a lot of the people that were really different and had survived things and gone through things where they were like, hey, I didn't have access. There wasn't someone around, but there were these books. It's always those damn Britannicas.
Yeah.
Like it's always right. Like just before you said it, I'm like, he's going to say Britannica. Like that's what we all had was the Britannica. There was one other.
That was our Google, man.
That was our Google. And I remember that's what we had to, like, that was like, if you got bored, that's literally that's what you read. Right.
Yeah.
And
that's what I did. I mean, he told me that. He said for me to go to read the F encyclopedia and find out what I wanted to know about Fiji. And lo and behold, there were 4 pages there worth of information about Fiji. So I was like, well, damn, it's that easy to find out shit. so
Yeah,
from,
right. Imagine saying that to a kid today. Listen,
yeah,
it's just easy that you have to walk over there, find the book, take the book out, look at, right? A kid would be like,
yes.
what? I can't
And
just say, hey Siri,
yeah,
tell me
exactly. Here it is. Now we got these smartphones, but we use them for dumb shit.
Yeah,
It's like,
ain't that the
it's
truth?
okay. But yeah, that summer when he said that to me, and I went and read that information, and it was there. Shit, like you said, I didn't have nothing else to do that summer. I read all of them, A to Z, every last one of them. And from that point on, going forward as a student, they had me in this little program called was GATE program, like Gifted and Talented Education. And they used to take us on extra field trips and shit like that. It was give us all extra homework and everything, right? But it was a privilege to be there because you were smart, right?
Yeah, that was a really twisted. I was in the gifted program. They put us in a separate room from everybody else that was a little bit darker. That was like the utility room.
Yeah.
They gave us. Now I liked the work because it was really cool, like mind puzzles and shit. But then it was like, and then you have these extra 2 or 3 books. I'm like, maybe wait a minute. The reward system here is backwards.
Something ain't right, man. Yeah.
I was like, no.
in California, they used to take us, man. I've been whale watching so many times, and I've been to the La Brea tar pits and everything around. I mean, and you know what? That brings up another kind of point, in terms of what we were talking about a little while ago, the division and stuff like that. Even at that age, I think I got to be around the 4th grade or so. And I remember, getting on the bus every day, or not every day, but whenever we would have those trips. And, they would make an announcement over the thing. Okay, all the Gate Kid programs report to the lunchroom, blah, blah, right? So we roll down there to the lunchroom, and we would get on our little special bus, and we drive off, and all the other kids were looking at us like, I wish I could go, So it was like, it was division even then, right? Because this one time.
You're lucky that they were like, oh, I wish we were on the trip. In mine, I remember I literally opted out. I had and I was so afraid of my father, but I faced my father and told him I did not want to go to the Gifted and Talented program. I thought it was like 3rd or 4th grade because the bullying was so fucking bad.
Yeah.
And
the tough kids called you nerds.
Oh, and it was like, and it was I was in a Jersey public school. And it was brutal. It was fucking brutal. And it was more than just, and it was like, there's no cameras, there's no cell phones. Every fucking teacher is like 8, it was like 65 and above. They couldn't hear. As soon as they turned their back, you were fresh meat. So there's like, I was like, there's no way you're going to put me in a school where I'm in a whole class of like targets. Like, I wish if I could go back and talk to myself and be like, dude, listen, with the multiple targets you can avoid, because I was also like, I love sports and I like to play. So I eventually was able to deal with this nerd type moniker by just being physically tougher, which is a whole nother trauma response, right? Like, it was like, but for me, it was like, I was the same way, except it was like, I was like, I didn't do it because I faced my father. I said, I don't want to do it. And I think I had realized, because my father was the one time that he was like lenient about it, was like, all right, go to your room, I'll talk to your mother, and didn't make me do it. I came to find out many years later, the one soft spot he had is that he was bullied really bad. And so when he realized, oh, that's going on, I'm going to let him I was getting straight A's. Yeah. So in my dad's eyes, he's like, well, in my dad's eyes, if you got straight A's, you were going to go to college and get a scholarship and everything was going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and God bless him for that. He always instilled education, but he had no idea all the other layers of shit. He was a type of guy, he like volunteered for Vietnam, but then had a heart issue, didn't take him in, went to like Embry-Riddle for a semester, then left and joined the New Jersey State Police, and then was like a lifelong cop and was like the cop of cops, right? Like didn't even do things wrong. Like he was the, like it was, which was so interesting growing up, but
yeah.
But Gifted and Talented, what did, so you're in San Bernardino.
Yeah, San Bernardino at that time. Yeah, by the time I'm in 3rd and 4th grade, I'm out in the San Bernardino area.
And then what happens when what becomes the genesis of you wanting to go into the military?
So to finish up the thought on that gate program stuff,
Oh
man,
yeah.
by the time I got into the ninth grade, I was over it, because by then I discovered sports and I discovered I was good at them, and and it was like
Oh,
these
okay.
2 or 3 hours of extra homework ain't getting it. So I started intentionally getting C's, and everybody thought I was crazy. I'm like, well, okay, I just don't want to do this shit no more. I'm
Yeah.
over it. I mean, you can only go whale watching so many times. I've been to the museum so much, I know that by the back of my hands. I don't want to go see the missions anymore. I'm good. And I don't want the extra 2 hours of homework, because now I got football practice. Now I got track practice. Now I got girls I got to talk to. No, I'm good.
See, yeah,
So,
okay. So you did a better route than me. I wind up I didn't do the gate where our gifted and talented. I wind up getting in a lot of upper classes for high school, but I'm sorry. I was in the upper classes in the elementary school. Well, that's when like 7th, 8th grade is when I like came out of my shell, where I was like, I'm not going to get picked on or bullied anymore. And I got into a fist fight, and I realized, oh, I'm good at this. Like, from having an old man who's a cop and a little heavy-handed, oh, I'm way more advanced than another 7th grader. Like, this is not even like, so
oh, yeah.
so I remember the first time I kind of had fought back, and and then I was like, oh, okay, so I can now stand my ground. So then getting into high school, it was like, I was banned from every trip. I had not seen, so growing up in Jersey, like, you go whale watching, we go to Statue of Liberty.
Okay.
Right. Like, that's our thing. We're going to take your Statue of Liberty. Maybe you'll go to ABC Studios and see a Saturday Night Live skit. Like, that was our thing.
Yeah.
I never went until I was married in my late 20s, because I was kicked off every trip and never allowed to go. So, but we all deal with things in our own way. But I did the same thing. I had to keep good grades. I got like, it was ass whooping time if you didn't have anything above a B. Period. Like, even that was like hell to deal with. But school. I didn't mind school. I just didn't do the work. I would do it. You know what I mean? I don't know. To me, school and sports weren't different. They were the same. They both, to me, were competitive.
Yeah.
Like, I never understood when I talked to kids on my football team. Like, I get why you were getting a C. You had an ulterior motive. But to me, I'm like, starting to get good at sports, starting to talk to the girls. Do you start taking that, like, you go through your bad boy phase for a little bit, like cutting some
Oh
classes?
yeah, of course. So that's the other part of this, is that, so my family is made up of, let's see, rolling 60 Crips. I got a few outlaw bikers that are family members and influential. I mean, the year that I was my 14 years, when I was 14 years old, one of my closest cousins, he was 16 at the time, but he got killed in gang violence, in Los Angeles. I've got an uncle who's doing 27 to life, a few others that have been shot and killed, and it's just that cycle of violence, coming from Los Angeles. I mean, most families that are from there, they have some family members or somebody who's been touched by that stuff that's out there, right? So yeah, I came from a family that they had a lot of pimps, players, hustlers, and everything else. And then there was my mom's side of the family, who were a little bit different. They were they certainly didn't have that aspect to them, but they had other issues which manifested themselves like in just drug use and everything else, right? So it wasn't the gang violence, but there was the drug use, and that was prevalent on both sides of my family, and it still is now. So a lot of family trauma to put behind, and that's to this point now in the work that I'm doing now. One of the most disappointing things about it is that sometimes your family just ain't coming. They're not interested in healing. They're interested in what it is that keeps them familiar as family. So one of the most hurtful things through all of this is that shit. There's people in my family right now that say I'm crazy. They say I ran off to Mexico and started doing drugs with the Indians and went crazy. That's what they say.
Yeah. I listen.
And it's because that good Christian logic won't let them think anything else. I guess I don't know.
My friend who was my former partner. I did a podcast with him, and he talks about this a lot. How the one hard thing about
hey John, hold on just a second, man. For some reason the volume went down. I can barely hear you. I don't know what happened there.
All right, let me see if it's on my side. Can you hear me a little bit?
Yeah. Let's see.
All right. How do I sound now?
Still kind of, I got the volume all the way up and it's still kind of low. It just changed real quick there. Let's see. Let's see if there's anything else I can do here. Settings, audio,
mic.
Speaker. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Your volume came back up. Okay. Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
All right, no worries. All right, so we're all back and running. Okay, so I was talking to a friend and coach, and he was saying that how on his podcast that that's part of like the dark side of the holistic thing is that when you start to do some of these alternative things, your family aren't going to be there. That's the hurtful thing. A lot of times your family aren't supportive because they're attached to the old version of you. And that's just one of the first things you need to let go is that, okay, hopefully they'll catch up or they'll be accepting in time, but that's like one of the things that's the hardest to let go of. And I think if you think about any relationship or any past trauma, right, it's the letting go and making peace with. That's always a very difficult, even if we want to trick ourselves to thinking we let it go, but we subconsciously self-sabotage. Right. So let's pick up your getting the purposeful C's. Going family trauma in high school. Is there some type of significant moment where you said, okay, I want to be a military man? And did you know what branch you wanted to go into, or
so that with that, it was kind of life happening itself as well, taking its own shape. As it turned out, with the sports and everything, I wanted to try to see what I could do in college, because I was pretty decent, so I went to,
what did you play?
Safety and wing back. Yeah. But
safety, what was your 40?
Man, 4.5, man.
See, if you're a young boy, you'll be like, well, that's okay for like 4.5 in the 80s. That
was pretty good.
You were
and I ran the 400 and the 200 in track, and in the 400 I was hitting around 49s pretty consistently. And I probably could have been a hell of a lot better, but I like to smoke weed back then.
So I was. I was a straight edge in high school. I trained my ass off. I cracked legs 5 flat. Dude, I was so fucking slow in high school. But I busted my ankles nonstop playing basketball as an elementary school. And then I busted my ankle bad. And no one taught me really how to like rehab and run. And it wasn't until I learned like what got me into coaching that I'd run like freaking, but I couldn't feel it because my subconscious, I could never let go because I injured the ankle running.
I didn't want to blow it back out.
And I just even though I thought I was 100%, I just wasn't. But
that's how it is when you injure something. Yeah, you just never feel back right. But that
you do. And I have the way to do it for $9.99 if you sign up after this podcast.
Yeah, me too, man. I got a retreat that can make you feel like everything's great.
Everything's fixed. Make you feel great. All right,
so yeah, man. So I left when I left high school. I went to college for a year up in Fresno, California, and by this time I'm 18. And after I'm in college after the first semester, I became a parent. I became a 19-year-old expecting father, right? So repeating the same cycle. My father was 19, my mother was 16, and here I go. I'm the first one in the family who had a halfway decent shot at doing something in college and had the, just the ability to do it. And then I get up there and I messed around on a weekend, and there you go. You know, now all of a sudden I'm about to be a father. So I remember calling my dad, and I was like, Dad, yeah, I'm gonna be a father. And he was like, well, boy, time for you to go to work. We didn't send you to college to make babies. You could have done that at home.
He ain't wrong. He ain't wrong.
He ain't
Right?
wrong.
Sometimes no matter whatever your issue may be with your old man, sometimes he would just say some shit that you're like,
Yep.
all right, you're not wrong, but I don't need to hear that from you right
now. or it's like, okay, I don't get what you're saying right now, but probably in a few years it'll hit. You know, that kind of thing.
That goes on with me. I had lost my father, not early, but I'd say, you know, in my like late 30s, right?
Yeah.
So that cycle in your 40s when you're really getting a lot of your
Yep. When the ass kicking is really happening. Yep.
Yeah. I'm like, but go ahead. So he tells you, boy, you could have done that.
Yeah. So he's like, yeah, time to go to work now, boy. And I'm like, well, shit. I'm 19 years old. I'm up here in college. I'm eating microwave burritos and top ramen half the time. Shit. What can I go and do? And then military. So
yeah, just like that.
Yeah, I ran into a recruiter at Denny's, right? But
no.
now to speak to it earlier, when I was in high school or you know, junior high or any of that, I had no inclination of anything military. That was the last thing I ever thought about. You know, I didn't. It wasn't anywhere on my charts.
Really?
When,
I was set to go to, not set, they were pushing me to go to Air Force Academy.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad wanted me to go to, even though I didn't go to, and I was actually decent at boxing.
Yeah.
And they had a boxing team. So I remember the recruiters came down, and I was kind of thinking about it because I knew Air Force football team ran a wishbone, and that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, I get to fly jets. That might be kind of cool. And no fucking clue until the recruiter showed up and showed me the video of what year one was. And I was like,
I'm good.
Yeah, I will. And I knew, but so I was actually looking at it my senior year pretty in depth. Like they were like, no, we'll bring it down. And I was like, my family was very modest. Like you know, so I had no senators or congressmen to get you got to get appointed to go to West Point.
Yeah, it's for the elites, you know, it's basically, yeah.
And I'm like, I got none of that. And what had happened was my boxing coach was a police officer who was also a former Marine. And he wanted me to box really bad. And I said, no, I can't cut the weight. I want to play football. And I sucked at football. But I love football. I was really good at boxing, but I just couldn't get into, I loved it. I enjoyed it, but not more than football. But I was delusional about, I'm like, you know, my boxing coach was like, you're good at this. He's like, your high school's horrible, son. We won one game, I think, in 4 years that I was there. Seriously.
Wow.
And so I was looking at it, and I was just fucking like, man, this is intense. Like I couldn't. And I was in my rebellious stage. I was just right. So you're in high school. You're having a great time. You're not even looking at it. It's not even on your radar.
Not even on my radar, man. When my senior year, the recruiters came in there and they offered the ASVAB test, and they said if the seniors went and took it at 11 a.m., you get the rest of the day off. So I'm like, shit, I'm going. That's the only reason it got me there, right? So I went and took the ASVAB at 11 o'clock, and I must have drew happy faces on that bitch. I didn't care. I didn't even read half the questions. I just wanted to be off in the rest of the day because I hadn't made a date.
That's awesome.
Serious shit, man. So it was so funny that, you know, here it is a year later, I contacted the Army recruiter. You know, he found me at Denny's and we go to talking, and he's like, well, you're a college student? I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to have to leave. I got something else I got to do.
You recruiter from high school, you run into at Denny's a year.
No, I ran into a recruiter at Denny's in Fresno when I was up there. When I found out that I was going to be a father and I was looking for something else to do, just so happens, you know, I ran into a Army recruiter at Denny's, and we got to talking. And then by that time, I'm looking for something to do. I said, I'm okay. If I want to get some benefits and some money and something, okay, then that sounds like what I can do right now at 19 years old, right? So I talked with him. And I asked him, I said, well, can I finish my school year? Because school was going to be done in May. And he was like, okay, yeah, you can do that. And you can go to basic training in the summer, right? So we start the process of getting me going. And he's like, have you ever taken the ASVAB test? And I was like, yeah, I took it once back in high school. And he was like, well, how'd you do? I said, shit, I don't know. I didn't even check the score. I mean, so some kind of way, this was way back when, but he still was able to call the LA Meps and get my score. So
they probably had one of those old ass metal filing cabinets. This motherfucker, what? He drew smiling. We remember him.
So he calls LA, right? And he gets this fax sent up, right? Who does that anymore, right? Fax. So I scored a 15 on the ASVAB because I was in there just fucking around. I didn't even. So he comes back with this score and he calls me. It's like 2 days later. He's like, I got to do some research and I'll call you back. So he calls me back. He's like, man, you got a 15 on the ASVAB. Are you sure you can pass this thing? And I was like, bro, I wasn't even trying. I promise you. Bring me your test. I'll knock it out. Right. So yeah, I had a 15 on there from just messing around. So again, I had no intention of joining the military. That was the last thing on my mind. It was just a life situation that kind of drove me that way. I became a teenage father, and I was like, okay, I got to go find something to do. So that's when I joined up. And when I got in, my intention again was just to do 4 or 5 years, get whatever skill they were going to give me, and then move out, right? But when I got there, it was pretty cool, man. Like my first duty station was I was up in Seattle, like Fort Lewis, Washington, like Tacoma area. So beautiful, right? But I was with a horrible unit, so I couldn't wait to get out of there. But when I left that place, I ended up going to Panama. And when I stayed, I ended up being able to stay in Panama almost 5 years because I went down originally on a 3-year tour. And it was just such beautiful duty, man. I was having such a good time that I extended. So I ended up staying I ended up leaving Panama after 4 years and 9 months, and that was, I was there from 1992 to the around 95, the end of 95. And that was my first tour of service. And I got out. And when I got out, I went back to Los Angeles, and it was my intention to do some federal government work or whatever else it was that I was going to do. And I was in the reserve. And I was in the reserve for a while. And by that time, that's when, let me back up. I was in the Army active duty. And then when I got out, I joined the Air Force Reserve. And this was around 1997, 98. So then 2001 comes around. So we all know what happened then. 9/11 happened in 2001. And I was a reserve member at that time. So we got called up for active duty for a period of 2 years and got deployed all over the place. And the good thing about that is that I deployed with the Air Force. They actually got some better accommodations and stuff than the Army. But still, I had to, I was gone 2 years, right after September 11th happened. They put us on activation, and I went a number of different places. We started off with a train up down in Georgia at Moody Air Force Base. Then we went to Spain. We went to Kuwait, where some folks got forward or deployed over to Afghanistan. So it was a lot of movement during that 2 years, deployment time. And we ended up going over there for in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, which was the Afghanistan mission. So we did the flight line security and some convoy security and all that. There was some folks that had forward deployed there. So after 2 years of active duty, I looked up and I came back home after that deployment. And I had right at 11 years, right at 10, 11 years of active duty. So like, okay, do I really want to go back and, go back to the job that I was doing, or let me try to find a way to write out these last few years of active duty and see if I can ride off into the sunset, right? So of course, the Air Force, I couldn't stay on active duty with them. So then I bounced back to the Army. And I went back to the Army and ended up being a recruiter for them with the Army National Guard program there in Georgia as an active duty component. So I did that. And also during that time frame while I was there, I had the opportunity to teach senior ROTC at Morehouse, Clark, and Spelman HBCUs at the universities down there. I was on the campus, teaching those young cadets how to be officers and, shaping and molding some young minds in that fashion. And ultimately, with that, the organization that I was with in Georgia in 2013 is when I retired and walked away from that. There was a whole lot of madness and things going on inside that recruiting battalion, as you can imagine. I mean, there's any number of horror stories out there about recruiters and the things that are happening, but in particular in this battalion, there was some pretty shitty things going on, and I was the guy who decided to tell the truth about it. And when I did, then everything that I did prior to that didn't mean anything. You know, once you go against the good old boys, that's a wrap, right? So,
Well, can you talk a little bit more to because I don't think a lot of if you don't have family in the military, you don't know people, like I'm not aware of, you know, is there anything you're willing to speak on about what was going on?
Yeah, so essentially, I'll put it out there. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, they're in Atlanta. I mean, I was in recruiting battalion in Atlanta, and what was happening within the organization was just a lot of impropriety stuff, sexual impropriety going on. You know, recruiters having affairs with some of the applicants. You know, some of the teachers at the schools. I mean, I was a team NCOIC, and at one time, I had a call from a high school principal that told me that he had 3 of his teachers inside of his faculty lounge, all 3 of them fighting over one of my recruiters. Yeah. So, you know, it's just one of those things, you know.
It just be crazy. It just be crazy. That's
what I gotta say. Crazy. Yeah. And then the leadership.
By the way, I'm quoting a TV show when I say that, so in case this.
Yeah, I got you.
But what? So let me say this too, because I feel you on this one, because I get a bad rap because let's just say I manage every so often and way more often than I want to get involved with someone from the outside that, whether I'm consulting, working with them, that everyone thinks is a gem, and they're letting fucking shitty shit go on in their company or what's going on. And of course, like I don't have this in the military side, but this, you know, and I. You know, but maybe it's more believable in the civilian side, like corporate side, you know, because it's nasty. But man, my thing is this: is that you think they're good people and the shady shit they're doing, and I'm always willing to, like, I'm not willing to look the other way. But I'm also not willing to investigate. Just stay away from me and mine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And don't flaunt it. But if you're gonna like bring it in front of me, I'm gonna call you on it. I don't know what else to do.
That's it. Yeah, I'm that way. It's like if you want to be on that bullshit, okay, cool. That's all right. But at the end of the day, if it starts bleeding over too much, then yeah, somebody's got to say something. And that's,
well, if you get me involved, I only get involved. I'm the same person. You know what I'm saying? Like I am me.
Yeah.
You get me involved, I'm involved now. It's not no rules, right? Like it's like, and I'm no saint, and I can understand things, which also tells me like. If I'm saying it's too much, it's too much. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Because again, I'm really that same way too. I'm a go along and get along type of guy. You know, I'm like, okay, everything's cool, no harm done, no foul, right? But when something's brought to my attention that I know is foul, and the person who brought it to my attention is looking at me to try to help them fix it, then okay, that's a wrap. You know, whoever's got to go down is going down. It is what it is. Yeah, I can't do nothing but the truth.
That's on. Yeah, that was on you that you played that game. You got me right, like. And I went through that with the company I was just with, where when I brought these things that were going on in attention, and some of them were the same thing, and some of them were not as drastic as that, but 1 or 2 instances where I was like in a position where I was physically threatened, like I got to do my face, like and I'm just like, you know, and I'm like. Yeah, and I'm just like,
dude, you got no idea.
Yeah, I was just, it was funny, but I was just like, it was like my 3rd day there, and
hold on just a second.
Yeah,
I gotta grab a charger. I'll be right back.
Good. I'm gonna pause it real quick.
Okay, yeah, pause. I'll be right there.
If I can.
I'm looking at my charger. Let's see here.
Is there a way to pause it? Stop.
All right. Okay, put this thing.
Oh, there is a pause button there. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pause it real quick. And we're recording again. Okay, so
let's go. All
right. So you're if I remember, you're a recruiter, working down in Georgia.
Yeah.
Saw some stuff. I think is where we left off. I saw some stuff with my thing. I was about to go on a horrible tangent of all the crap I've been dealing with. So why don't you just pick back up? Because we're about you today. I mean,
okay.
But I feel you. I know what that's like. I've been in that process many times, but
it's one of those things where you find something that you enjoy doing. You know, you're giving your heart and mind and soul to it and everything else. I mean, for me, recruiting was easy. You know, and it was it was the first time in my life when I started, kind of feeling like I was helping people out of their situations, even though, of course, the military is not the best answer for everybody. Still, there were certain kids who you just, you impacted their life in a way that was positive, and you were probably one of the first adults who ever even showed any interest in that kid's life. So it was like, every year when I was a production recruiter, the mission was somewhere around anywhere between 20 and 30 people per year, that type of thing, young kids and whoever else was eligible to join. During that time frame, the people that I was making contact with and offering the opportunity to, I always did my best to just really take care of them. I mean, I wasn't one of those recruiters that sold them a dream that wasn't going to be true or anything else, because that happened to me and I didn't want that to happen. My recruiter that signed me up, of course, I signed up for reasons that are different than most folks. It was kind of necessity and everything else, but even still then, he didn't do a very good job of preparing me for what I was going to really get into. So I always said that if I had an opportunity to be somebody's guide in that aspect, then I would be good with them. And to that point, I mean, that's what made recruiting easy for me, because the kids that I would recruit, I took care of them. So those kids were the ones that became my recruiters. I didn't have to recruit anymore. Once you start taking care of a few folks and do the right thing by them, a lot of these kids would bring folks there. I stayed in the recruiting battalion. It was eight years total.
Do you still feel that, like, knowing what you know now, dealing with what you've dealt being outside,
mm-hmm.
and doing what you're doing now, would you still feel recruiting is like is as positive as you thought it was in the beginning?
No, absolutely not. I mean, and to that point, I hadn't experienced, the things that I did, just from that battalion in itself. And then, I hadn't had my own shit come crashing down on me yet at that point. I was still kind of in the America mode, and really thinking that I was doing what I needed to be doing. If you're asking me, would I tell a kid to join the military right now? Hell no. I certainly wouldn't tell anybody to join the military right now, especially not my own kids, not with the things that are happening in this current existence and iteration. No, I would not. And, to that point as well, there's a lot of the kids that I work with. I mean, they were kids back then, but these are grown adults now. I mean, on my Facebook profile and everything else, there's probably, 30, 40, 50 kids that I've dealt with in the past, and see them all doing well now with, families and everything else. Some of the kids that were officer candidates when I was at Morehouse and Clark, those kids went on and are thriving and doing great things. Some of them are majors and captains and everything else now. So, there is some positivity that happened in there. There's a lot of impactful ways to touch folks' lives and put, some opportunities on them that they may not have had previously. One example I can give you is when I first started recruiting, I knew when I got back to my office, I knew that if I just sat in that office all day long and waited for folks to come in there, that I wasn't going to make numbers. I knew that, right? So I started coming up with, I said, I got to get out here and shake the bushes. I got to come up with new and inventive ways to find people, right? Okay. So this, my second week back, right? I go up to this community center over in Atlanta, and it's, I recruited in Southwest Atlanta. I went to this place. It was a community center right across from like the Cascade roller rink, So I'm out there and I'm talking to some kids, it's about 5 or 6 of them. And I finally get to the point where I'm trying to, give the pitch. I was like, well, hey, what would you guys think if I said I'll come pick you up tomorrow and take you up to do the military test, and we'll see if you can, see if you can get down, And they were like, yeah, that sounds good. So foolish me, I didn't pre-test any of them or anything. I was just happy they were talking to me, right? I'm a brand new recruiter, right? So the next day I show up and I got 4 or 5 kids in the van. I'm just happy they showed up, right? So I take them right there from Southwest Atlanta and drive up to Marietta, Georgia. There's a Dobbins Air Force Base up there is where they give the ASVAB test. So just from that 10 to 15 minute drive from Cascade up to Cobb Parkway in Marietta, man, you would have thought those kids were in New York somewhere. Like when we got off the highway up there on Cobb Parkway, they were like, oh man, that's Joe's Crab Shack, man. I seen that on TV. Right? And you drive a little further, they're like, oh shit, that's a Lexus dealer, man. Whoa. So I'm listening to this going on in my van, right? And I'm like, God damn, how do I even begin to tell these kids what they can be in life when they don't even realize what's 10 minutes up the road from their house, and then it put me back to being that kid too. Because I grew up in LA, and from my grandmother's back porch in South Central, on a good day where there was no smog and the trees were just right, you could see the Hollywood sign, right? You could see.
Wow, that would be pretty iconic and cool, man. Yeah.
Yeah, you can see the sign from South Central, but the sound effects in the background are not what goes along with that sign, right? There's no helicopter and boat and all this other kind of shit, right? So the notion of it was, it came to me right then. It was like, God damn, these guys, they're me. We're not any different. I'm me and they are them. Had a few things in my life not happen the way that they did. I would have been stuck right there in South Central as well, thinking that a trip to San Bernardino was a trip to New York, right? So it's all relative to where folks start, begin, and have their influences, right? So with these kids, if you go back home with them, or when you go back home with them, you realize that mom and dad are the same way. And half the time dad's not there, right? So it's like everybody's their whole life happens in maybe a 10 or 15 mile radius.
Wow. And how many, in how many cities you think that are like that around the country?
Oh, pretty much plenty of them. I mean, it just presents itself in a different fashion, right?
Exactly.
like my family, some of my family's from Louisiana, right? So you go down there and it's a little small ass country town, like really small, right? Yeah. So over there, in the town in the parish where my people are from, the next biggest city is Monroe, Louisiana. And Monroe is not a big city. Okay. We're talking about maybe 500,000 people or something like that. But these folks that live out in the country, they feel like a trip to the big city is getting in the car and going over to Monroe and see the picture show, that kind of shit. Right. Yeah. So there's limitations that exist in all different realms. And then, just to see it manifest on a daily basis was amazing to me. It was, but then to think that I was that far removed from it was amazing too. Right? I had told myself that, well, I ain't like none of these folks. I've been around the world, right? But yeah, we're all the same. To speed that up though, about that group of kids, I mentioned that I didn't pre-test any of them, right? So
okay, that's right.
We get up there to take the ASVAB, and between 4 kids, man, the score was collectively at 32. I said collectively. There were kids that scored in the single digits on the test, right?
Wow.
And you got to have a 31 to pass, right? So the highest score achieved that day was a 21. And there were 3 other scores that were single digit that got us to the 32, right? So now the kid who did the 21, I was able to get him in 4 months later because that kid showed up at my recruiting office 2 times a week and did practice tests and did vocabulary cards and everything else. And that particular kid ended up joining. And then that kid 2 years later when he finished, or 1 year later when he finished high school, he went down to a place called Georgia Military College on a full ride National Guard scholarship, and that was one of the first kids that I ever met. Right. So
how normal is it for the recruiter to be tutoring somebody 2 days a week?
Sometimes they do it, but not very normal. I mean, a lot of times, a lot of the recruiters are just like, hey, if you can't pass the test, here's a study guide, come back and see me when you're ready.
When you're ready, yeah. Yeah,
that kind of thing. But not to get too far into it, but it was something about that kid, man, that I just knew that he needed a better opportunity, when I got to hear about his family situation, raised by his auntie and mama, who knows where the mama was, that kind of thing. And it was like, okay,
wow, gotcha.
This guy here needs this. And again, man, I'm not trying to sell the military as the biggest bill of goods that's out there as the greatest. But at that time for that kid, I feel like maybe it was. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for me, as a kid, even it came through for me when I needed it to. I mean, of course, I had no idea what it would all turn out to be, but in that moment when I needed what I thought was an opportunity in life or a way to get forward and move ahead, it was there. Of course, that was 20, 30 some years ago. A lot has happened in the last 20, 30 days, right?
So, yeah. Last 3 days, right? Last 3 days.
Yeah.
We want to get into that. We want to talk some politics.
Sure, man. I've got kind of a whole different perspective on that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'll throw it out.
I'm down.
I know you do too.
Yeah, no, I'm down. I've definitely moved into a more observational role.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But I also want to make sure that we have the time to talk about what you're doing now. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So before we get off on the political thing, fast forward to what was because I know there's always when I speak to people who've had these major changes, like most notably when I spent some time in Israel, and I would speak to people that were born and raised, Jewish men who were born and raised in America, that moved to Israel, went to yeshiva, became a rabbi, and decided to live there. You know, when you talk about a different cultural, right, like changeover, growing up in New York, New Jersey area, then deciding to forego all that comfort and go over here, 7,000 miles away. I'd always ask, everyone had a clear moment that was like, nope, I'm going this way. Do you have your hard right at Albuquerque? Do you know what moment where it's like, the military thing's not it. I need to build a community. I need to be because what I was saying right before we got on this was when I was talking about people that I want to interview, and most notably when I spoke to a good friend of mine that I wanted to send to you about the program we're about to talk about. I said to him, because he's a Marine, and oddly, I get along with the Marines. I just oddly get along with somebody, be like,
the warrior in you, man. That's all.
It's always those guys, right? And then people are like, yeah, well, the Marines are woo, and I'm like, well, what are you saying about me? Because I thought they were pretty normal.
Yeah, I relate to them well, yeah.
Yes, but so even in college. So anyway, let me not digress. So, he's a Marine, and he's very much like everyone's full of shit. Everyone talks shit. Not only is he a Marine, but he's also a Jersey guy, right?
Oh, sure. Well,
there's a double. And I said to Mike, and I said, listen, this guy, Mike, you know how people talk, they're going to do shit and then it doesn't happen. I was like, this guy started a whole fucking thing over here in this other fucking place that's beyond anything you've ever seen. He did a thing that he said he was going to do, and he did it. And then so you got to understand, I just speak that way.
Yeah.
And then Mike's like, oh, whoa. And I was like, no, he went and he did the thing. So I was like, he fucking did it. He said, I was talking to him. I was like, I don't know, he could be a little crazy. I meet a lot of crazy people in this business on the alternative holistic side, but he says he's going to go and build this thing and everyone can come to it, right? I don't want to say it yet, but he's going to build this thing, but he fucking did it. 3 years later, I think it was after I met you, you had actually moved down to, right? So tell us about what you're doing, where it's at, but hold on. Right? Give us the story. What's the hard right when you're like, no, I need to go do this thing?
Okay. So if there were a couple of hard rights, man, but the one that stuck, the one that landed was, after I had my medicine journey up in Phoenix in 2020 and started getting more involved with the medicine, doing it more often.
What led you there? What led you there to what? Because were you doing? Had you ever done psychedelics before?
No, absolutely not. So let me back up. I was when I was in Atlanta before I got ready to move out to Tucson, and this is at the time when all of the depression and everything and the suicidal ideation and all that started coming in. It was 5 years after I had retired. It was 2018, 2019, 2019 more so. My son graduated from high school in Georgia, and we went to Hawaii for a graduation trip. And at that time, I was at the height of my obesity. I was probably 296, something like that. And we went to Hawaii to celebrate my son's graduation. And we were, as a family, we took a picture out there on Diamond Head or wherever we were. Beautiful ass picture, right? So fast forward 5 months, we get back home, and I walked in the house, and my daughter was sitting on the couch, and she had her phone out, and she was just going through stuff, and she's like, "Dad, come here, look at this. Remember this? We had such a good time in Hawaii. This was awesome, right?" And she pulled up this picture. She pulled up the picture of our family out there, man, and I was like, I looked at myself in the picture, and I looked at them and I was thinking, bro, here you are in Hawaii, is arguably one of the most beautiful places in the world. You're there to celebrate the occasion of your son, leaving high school and getting ready to go play football and do great things. But you don't look happy at all. You look like you ate your former self, number one, right? and there's no joy anywhere in your eyes. Who the fuck is that? That's what when I was looking at my own picture and asking, who the fuck is that? And that's when it kind of started, an inkling to change. That was the day it was like, I'm tired of my own shit. This is what I look like to the rest of the world, and this is what I'm presenting. And oh my God, what about these kids? They were holding it together and doing well. We still had them in private school and all that good stuff. But man, I was hanging on a thread. It was just I hated the job I was doing. I hated the way I left the military. I just hated everything around me. But, how do you tell your kids, well, I'm not going to get up and go to work because I hate what I'm doing? Yeah. No, right? No. How do you tell your wife that, and to that point, the whole thing really put a strain on the relationship that I had with my family and with my wife. And, it's been really, really tough, but that was the time when I decided that, I first of all, I got to get this weight off me, right? There was another incident prior to that, man. I had a heart attack, being so damn fat. I showed up to work at the VA one day and the elevators were out and I worked on the 4th floor, right? So I start climbing the stairs and shit. After the second flight of stairs, the fucking check engine light came on. Right, so fucking check engine light came on, man. I couldn't do nothing but sit my ass down right there. Boom, I sat down on the stairs like, okay, shit, I got 2 more to go, and my heart's pumping and I'm sweating already. I'm like, Jesus, what? 2 flights of stairs, dude, really? Like, all right. So I continued up and I trekked up and got the other 2 done, and I got to the office and had to sit there for a minute, and I was okay that day. But then when I got home in the afternoon, I started up the stairs again to go to my bedroom and get relaxed for the day. And when I got about to the middle way of the stairs, boom, man, hit me in the middle of the chest like somebody hit me with a sledgehammer, man. It was almost knocked me back down the stairs, but I was able to, crawl back up and get into the room. And about that time, the wife had came home, and I'm there. I can barely speak. I'm like, I don't know I knew what was going on, but and of course she was a doctor, so she knew what was happening too. And yeah, man, that was the first real physical sign of, the weight and everything manifesting and making me just, be outside of myself, man. And I had to go to the hospital, and of course I had a heart attack. And then I had a doctor who was actually a decent doc. I don't really say that a whole lot. I haven't met a whole lot of decent doctors, but this guy was. And he basically just gave it to me straight up. He was like, dude, I'm looking at your charts. You were in the military just less than 5 years ago. You weighed 210 pounds, and here you are at damn near 300. So the best thing I can tell you is that if you want to live and do anything, past today, you got to get that weight under control. And at the time I had sleep apnea. I was fucking snoring all night and kept everybody blowing the roof off every night. That kind of stuff. If you don't start taking care of yourself, then you're not going to be here to do anything. And that was one of the reality checks there. And then, of course, I didn't listen in. I didn't listen right away then. It would still be a year later before I saw that picture and everything. And it just really got into my inner discipline about what I needed to do. And then when I moved, my family, we decided to move from Atlanta, Georgia, where I was working at the VA there. I was an employee labor relations specialist there. So I was responsible for like the suspensions and the disciplinary actions, adverse actions, and then representing the agency and the Merit System Protection Board, all that good kind of stuff. So I got to see the whole side of the, the EEO stuff, as well as the malfeasance things and all that. And again, remember, I'm a closeted nerd. So that job gave me access to all of the different, rules, guidelines, and regulations that ran the place, plus all of the precedents that were in court, plus all of the legal standings and everything else. So in my free time, that's what I was doing. I'm looking up stuff and I'm like, okay,
All right.
After a while, I figured out, okay, this organization is fucked up on purpose.
It's something I had a interesting issue with my son, which is because I did want to get into this with you as well. Like, had an interesting issue with my son where his mother had kind of threatened him, hey, if you don't finish a couple of these days of school, you're gonna have to do summer school. Because, and the school warned you because there's too many days off. And I'm perfectly happy if my son breaks the absence rule because his grades are good enough. If it's for his mom took him to Washington D.C., saw the museums, saw the propaganda. I'm still in a slight America phase. I'm still holding out. There's some good left in that fucking thing somewhere, man.
It's there somewhere, man. We just got to dig real hard to find it, but it's there.
Yeah, I'm hoping. But I still want my son to have that somewhat of that, right, proudness of the. So anyway, they threatened with that, and I'm like, no, absolutely not. That's not how this works. Because being like you, when I had the custody issue with my son, I had not only read every single law up and down, but I've read everything about the school boards and all these other issues and so forth. I made my son read. So my ex-wife and I get into an argument, and my son's kind of trapped in the middle of it. And she's this, right? You're the typical lawyer. You think you're, and I'm like, I said, well, either which way, our son, our son. I'm taking him out of fucking school the last 2 days. We're doing something, and he's not going to summer school. So me being me, I called the attendance teacher. I called the school. I got an email sent over, and she was just flabbergasted. But when my son came, because he was telling me, no, Dad, just stop. I said, what? You ain't telling me nothing. Right. I was like, if you want to tell me what it is, then you need to tell me what it is. Can you tell me what the law is? Can you name the statute? Can you tell me where the school has the right to do? So when my son came in, I sat his ass down and I made him read the actual law from Florida about attendance policies and what all the punishments are and stuff like that. And then I made him write a 2-paragraph summary. And some people kind of gave me a little flack about it. And I said, here's what you don't need to understand that I understand very well. There's an old saying that goes, you need to learn the rules so you know how to break them.
That's it.
Right. But more importantly, you need to know how other people are going to break them against you, because my son is half Puerto Rican and he takes very brown. He's brown. There's no people still will ask if he's my son. Still pisses me off. But he's brown and he's Jewish. And given the way the landscape's been the last year, I'm like, and the way history repeats itself, I was like, if you don't, and not only did I grow up white, cops, I had more than my fair share running with cops, and mouthed off and got the shit beat out of me. Like I have my stories, but there's no doubt in my mind that as the son of a cop with a little FOP card, I was able to get out of some things, or at least not get into worse shit. Right. Yeah. My son won't have that privilege. Right. I'm aware of that. Yeah. And it starts with little indoctrination issues. I'm not that. Oh, well, the attendance policy says I'm going to make you sit in summer school. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Where? Because actually, right? So it's like, and I remember once I had to speak this to a few parents and saying, listen, part of this is the issue that even as a white male, I was denied seeing my son almost 2 years. And then I had to go to court, and it took me 90 days. And then I had to bring my ex-wife to court. I had it written 50-50.
Yeah.
But as soon as she was like, nah, not going to follow that, it was like, well, now you need a whole movement. And they said, if this was opposite, you were the male and you had the baby, it was the female, no, we would come and take it. But right from the police, nope, nothing we're going to do. You have to get an order from a judge. So the only way I got my son back, and I have him, which was a 2-year journey, was because I sat there, and as from being a kid, like I said, my father he had a lot of his faults, but as a cop, he was like, you need to know the law. And I don't think he could tell me then, hey, everyone I work with is really fucked up and crooked. Right. He couldn't say it, but he knows. But he knew. It was very mob influenced in that Jersey area. You're talking 60s, 70s into early 80s, right? Yep. And he knew, and I don't think he would ever be that betrayal to say, hey, the cops are fucked up and whatever. But I think, right back to the conversation, I was like, wow, that's why my dad was like, what does the law say? what did you do? This is, and I'm like, why do I have to know? Right. And now with my son, I'm like, man, you need to know from the very beginning. I don't care if it's a teacher, you will show respect. You will speak respectfully, but you will not take any shit. But what does the law say? You know what I mean? Like, and then, and I got off on a tangent, but I know you and I have spoken about this. Like, I did want to touch upon being fathers because it's a fucking crazy era, I think. Right.
It is.
But go ahead and finish up. I'm sorry with the, I want to get to the journey, how you got to the hard right. You're like, I'm tired of my shit.
Yeah.
Who says to you, you got to do some shrooms, brother, you got to do some shrooms and trip the fuck out.
Right.
Like,
You'll never guess. It was okay. So I was riding with a motorcycle club in Atlanta.
What are you riding?
I was on a street glide is what I was riding at the time. Yeah.
I just got a little Sportster. Don't make fun of me.
No worries.
Little baby. I'm gonna upgrade when I grow up a little bit. I just ride by myself. I gotta love the jacket, no patches. It's pretty sad, but
that's the way to go, though. I mean, the whole club thing is a whole different deal.
Yeah,
it's a whole different deal.
Listen, I'm Sons of Anarchy. I've watched the show. I'm there.
Yeah. So what happened there was, okay, so when I moved from Los Angeles out to San Bernardino when I'm 7, 8 years old, one of the guys that I met out there and ended up growing up with, childhood friend, this guy went into the Navy and did 20 years. And of course I went into the Army, but both of us we shared those fucked up childhoods with the dads that were on drugs. And it was he and I that went and got the paper routes together when we were 11 years old. We both lied and said we were 12 so that we could get the job. And our soccer coach was the regional manager. So he made it happen anyway. Right. So this guy, him and I every morning for 3 or 4 years, wrapping our papers together, getting out there and doing it. Right. So childhood friend. Right. So somebody I've known and trusted and loved forever. Right. So he also became a motorcycle guy. Right. So I was riding with my club in Atlanta. And then, of course, I'm talking to him. He's out in Arizona and everything. And then when it came time for me, the wife took a transfer to the Tucson VA as a lead administrator. And then my son had took a football scholarship out to the University of Redlands in California. So, mama wanted to be a little closer to him. And we both knew that we needed to be out of Georgia because that was a ridiculous place to begin with. So we came out here. Now, that was January of 2020. So in November, there's a big bike rally that happens down in Mexico called the Rocky Point Rally. And I had just left my club in Atlanta because I knew I was moving. And I didn't want to do the Lone Ranger nomad thing. I wasn't going to do that. I was like, nah. And plus some things that happened that made me kind of get disillusioned anyway. So I was done with that. So my buddy's like, hey, man, my club out here, the Rolling Locos. And it's now the Rolling Locos now. These guys are all a bunch of veterans and combat vets and some civilians as well. But all the veterans in the club are on the psychedelic journey. They're all recovering from PTSD and everything else, right? So that's what was different to me about this club from the beginning. But he told me to come meet them out in Mexico. And I'm thinking, well, shit, okay, I just retired. I really ain't got much else going on. We're getting ready to move out there anyway. I'm sorry, I didn't retire. I just had a break from my VA job. I was off for 6 months. It was a mental health leave, right? So I had just did all that. And I said, okay, well, yeah. So man, I rode my Harley from Atlanta all the way to Mexico to Rocky Point. Wow. I did over a 3 or 4 day period. Yeah, I broke it up over 3 or 4 days actually. Just kind of took my time cruising out there. But I rode all the way from Atlanta to Rocky Point, and I met with this club called the Rolling Locos, and these guys were just like I said, my childhood friend was there. The president of the club was a cool guy. There was another dude in there, scout sniper, and it was his story that really got me to go ahead and try this. So my buddy that invited me, he told me that he had done ayahuasca, and he had, of course, the same upbringing, the childhood, drug abuse and everything else and all that. And then, his father had died and he had some other difficulties, but he discovered ayahuasca and told me about it. And he was like, brother, we came up together with the same bullshit. It worked for me. I know it'll work for you too. And he said, and I see you over there weighing 300 pounds. That ain't you. What the fuck?
And you were riding on your bike at 300. I was about to ask you, damn.
Yeah. Yeah, I was a big fat biker, man, just doing it. But I spent that weekend with those guys, man, and it was real special, because at that time, like I said, I had walked away from the club life and everything else, and I was like, if this is something that I would ever consider doing again, these would be the type of guys I would do it with, because they're on this personal healing journey, and it all makes a lot of sense. But it still wasn't until I got back home to Atlanta and then came back out here that I actually ended up trying a ceremony. I didn't do that until 2020. This was like, leading into 2020. So when I got back out here to Arizona, those guys had invited me to actually they told me it was an ayahuasca ceremony. And I prepared, of course, everybody, when you get ready to do something like that, you start Googling yourself to death. I'm going to research it. I want to know what's going on. I got to figure out all this shit, right? And being that guy, right? So, and those fuckers, they did it on purpose. They told me ayahuasca, but it was actually a mushroom ceremony. So all the research and shit I did meant nothing.
Meant nothing, yeah. Probably so it was probably good so you didn't panic when you were tripping, and you go down the wrong right?
Yeah. So I roll up to Phoenix thinking that I'm going to do an ayahuasca ceremony, and it actually ends up being a mushroom journey followed by the bufo in the morning. And like I said, man, that first mushroom journey, I mean, again, I was somebody who was already looking and considering all kinds of different, alternatives as truth, because I had felt like I had been looking forever. I was a Mason for 15 years when I was in the military. I did that. Yeah. Somebody told me that those guys knew the answers. So I said, okay, well, let me go see what they're talking about. All right. So I did that for a long time until I figured out what that really is, and I left it alone. But anyway, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, let's see. Everybody, nobody wants. Yeah, man, we're gonna have to get some.
All I can say, I'll give you one name, and I'll leave it at that. Baphomet.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Really are. That's the current rumor. That's what they really are. The What am I give a fuck? The devil worshiper. I don't give a dude. Shit. Fucking.
Yeah, and you know what?
I leave my door open, motherfuckers. Leave it. Let's go. I'm in that headspace. I haven't made it out. It's in peace.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to read some books. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and again, that's the toughest part of all this too, is that eventually, when you've done enough of the homework, the soul searching, the comparison, I mean, just all of those different things. Eventually, we arrive at a knowing that we are not these bodies. We are the spirit and the energy that animates them. And probably last time you did this, you didn't look that way.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, what story are we really clinging to? Right. Because it's like, okay, if I'm the soul that's inside this body, then is it even reasonable to think that every, 50 or 100 times or however many times I've done this, that I look the same way, that I had the same situation? No. Yeah. So it's like, in healing, we're talking about getting over your stories, right? Because at the end of the day, that's really all they are stories. Things that happened, some of the things happen to us, some of them things happen for us, and then some things just happen. It's just a matter of what emotional value and everything else we put on those incidents, right? So that's how we shape, who we believe we are and what we think we believe and all that other good stuff. But eventually what I'm saying is that we understand that our consciousness and who we really are underneath these meat suits, it transcends race, it transcends everything.
Yeah, I've never understood, that's a poor way of explaining it, but on the holistic coaching side, right? Mm-hmm. I came into I've never done ayahuasca or DMT. I've done mushroom, but I've never done a formal good ceremony. Mm-hmm. I've done like you said, there's a lot of, wackadoos or people that they have good intentions, but it's just not, done. And
some of them don't have good intentions. The only intention is
100%. Yeah. But I've always I know it'll be good for me. I have, like I said, I had mentioned before, I've done this. He's done my podcast. He has his own podcast. I refer to him a lot. He helped me start my business. He was very much like me. He had some anger issues, child trauma issues. It's kind of like on the same story you. And he went and he did it. And he came back and not only is he's completely different, and he's been on a tear for the last 10 or 15 years doing great things. And it's funny because I want to say, understanding my limited language, I'd say 3 years ago, it was right around before COVID, going to COVID, where I was mentally like, I need to do something. That's where I'm so fucking stuck in this cyclical rut that no matter what I do, no matter how good it is on paper, like I just went through this a couple weeks ago. We were talking before the recording. I went to a company where I thought it was safe. Guy I knew for 10 years, supposed to be a good guy. I took a lot less money, and I was just like, man, I'm just no problems, no issues, and then I'm just going to work on me. But I just wanted like something easy, and it's all good on paper. And the guy just turns out to be a douche, like just like I said. Then I still managed to save this new project I'm working on, and I go to a company that on paper should have everything done. The owner's on, we're just gonna be a match made in heaven. We're really good at what you do. You're good at what you do. We'll handle what we do. And within a week, it just drops the ball, you know. And you know, when you say, hey, you're tired of your own story and you're tired of your own bullshit. You and I have had this discussion even over a summer ago when I was going through some darkness. I moved down to Florida, just won my son back same way. I'm like, I was shredded. I fucking looked the best I ever looked in my life physically. Like I almost was on the other pendulum of this where I was at 46 years old. I never looked better.
Right.
I just sold this business, and it kind of sucked, but I still had a little bit of money. I was winning my son back, but I was fucking miserable. Yep. And I'd sit there and I'd realize I'd put my son to bed, and I'd be like, I should be happy. I got into this nice neighborhood. I got a better neighborhood than I ever grew up in. Nicer, better, newer house than I ever grew up. Like I was like, check. Yep. And this is the third time that I had all these things and it blew up in my face, and then I rebuilt it, and then it blew up in my face, and then I rebuilt it. And here I'm in, like, I think the fourth reiteration. And I'm like, oh my God, this cycle won't continue. And I know I need to, and I know you were like, you just got to come down, man. For anyone who is listening, I can tell you this, I haven't done it, but it's like the number one thing I need to do, because I'm now running into my fourth cycle of like, again, this business venture on paper was great. And somebody said to me, I'm like, man, I feel so bad for you. And I'm like, I appreciate that. But now I've learned to read the universe, that when the perfect plan on paper goes completely fucking, I'm in the wrong direction. Right. Like and I know in order for me to figure out which direction to go to, it's none of the directions I've been in before.
Nope.
And I got to be someone I wasn't before, whether it was another like
inward.
And, yeah. And so I think it's something that I'm looking forward to. I'm like this fucking close to getting certain. Like I was close in April, and I took this trip out to Utah. With the group that I'm working with for this exposition. And I'm really glad that was the right thing to do. Yeah. Wow, what a fucking great group of men I met. And they've supported me in this business debacle that's happened. But the next thing I'm doing is I got to get down to see you. I got to get this other fucking wackadoo, my Marine friend. I call him a wackadoo.
Come together. Bring him. Come together.
You know what I was hoping, man? I remember Chad was talking about something last October, right? Did you guys ever get to do that?
So what we're looking at now is the same thing. There's Jamie Marquez is with a group called Normalized Psychedelics, and she just came down here and did a pretty extensive interview and article piece and everything that's actually got published in Cincy magazine, which is the national cannabis magazine. She spent a weekend with the Rolling Locos, and then she came and spent a weekend down here during the retreat. But anyway, what Jamie and I are working on together now, possibly for November, is something called Operation Heavy Hitter, where we're going to bring, some of the folks down here that like Chad and yourself, some of these other folks that are involved with other organizations that want to see exactly what it is that we're doing. Jamie came down basically just as a journalist to go ahead and kind of write the article and report on what we were doing. But while she was here on a weekend when I brought down my very first Vietnam veteran, to this retreat. And just with the positivity and everything that was going on, she was like, you know what? I'm doing it too. I'm like, great. Come on in.
Really?
Yeah. So she had her experience down there. And again, it was just beautiful. I mean, she was able to release, 30 years worth of trauma that she was holding on to, and then turned around and wrote this story, and it's getting some, our story out there and the information for everybody that needs to know it. And again, she's going to be putting together the Operation Heavy Hitter. So if you guys are interested in coming down for that, we're looking at the November timeframe.
Hell yeah. That would actually be amazing because we have this expo event. So we're doing RoofCon 24 in Orlando, October 23rd, 24th, 25th. And then part of me helping them out, they gave me a table. That's where I think I was talking about that off camera. So we're going to do a table for Mental Joe, which for those of you out there, Mental Joe, you'll see it on our Instagram. It's an organization that sells apparel. They had been really supportive of me when, and I still want to do this, but we'll see. But I was going to compete in an MMA at my age, but using the training, galleys and stuff. But Chad was very supportive and was going to do it during Mental Health Month. And so I've been working with him, and then we tried to get this fundraiser going for him last year, and the MMA pretty much just stole the money. They just debacled the whole fucking thing. It wasn't even a lot of money. I think it was $100, and they tried to. It was a debacle where if I could have grabbed the guy and smacked him in the face, I would have. But being the fact that he was in a wheelchair, it made it.
Did somebody put him in that wheelchair?
Well, he put himself in the wheelchair.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, see, that was how I get duped into it. As much as I try to be a hard ass and I can kind of have discernment for other people, what are you doing? That's stupid. Get away from that. That's part of my issue is that I keep getting involved with people who give me the sad story. He's like, my girlfriend was crazy and I tried to break up with her. So she pulled the wheel and my car went off in the woods and it ended my fighting career. So now, even though I'm in the wheelchair, I want to run this MMA promotion. So young kids like me who grew up shitty can get an opportunity. And it turns out he's faking blood work and he's doing coke in the parking lots. And he's and I was helping him out for 6-7 months, not getting paid, supposed to get paid from this, go to that. Nothing ever worked out. And I set up an event with Harley Davidson. It would have been awesome. And some of the fighters were kind of assholes too. I have no problem saying that, which was, you're some local Florida kids out of the Tampa area and you have an opportunity to Jake Paul proves this. You never in history do you have the ability to market and sell yourself, especially if you're an athlete like you have right now. And I give you the opportunity to broadcast and do this at one of the more famous Harley Davidsons to do your lineups. Half the side doesn't show up. Each side's got to knuckle up again. Half of them don't show up. No one's tweeting or whatever the hell they were supposed to be doing with the social media, posting it and going. And then they're sitting on the bikes. There's leaving wrappers. It was horrible. We even set up a winging. We were supposed to set up a winging contest. The guy didn't really. It was just a fucking debacle. Let me just end it at that. And then the creme de la creme of this debauchery was where's the money for the charity? Where's the jar? There's no money in the jar. What do you mean? I was I just saw it halfway with dollars. When I went out, so what's going on? And then the guy tried to tell me, I think someone from Harley took it. I'm like, what? So I talked to the person from Harley. They're like, this guy has a reputation in the area, but whatever. So it turns out, so you can tell there's one of my trauma I'm gonna have to release.
Yeah.
Well, because I wanted to strangle the guy and I just left quietly.
Yeah.
We had not quietly, we had our own shit, but then he went on social media, blocked me and put all this bad shit about me.
Of course. Yeah.
And so then I went to work for the other guy who told me another sob story. Oh, I got to put my company back together. This will be perfect. I'll bring you in. I'll teach you everything. Fucking guy disappeared. Was never around. Turned out he was just a trust fund prince. He took over mommy and daddy's company. Had no idea what he was doing. And it's funny. He's that guy who in Orlando, everyone thinks he's such a good guy. And he's not only is he a douche, but he's dumb. He's not a smart guy. People think he's no, he's not a business entrepreneur. He went to high school. He went to high school at two, not even famous, but semi-famous, somebody from NSYNC, the boy band. Yeah, I know. And this DJ who did the song "We the Best" for DJ Khaled.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, but DJ Khaled's a bitch, and I know, but he's a bitch. This, I know this. This is so. Back me up on this. We're gonna way fucking left on this. Yeah. But I got pissed because a doctor of fitness was shitting on hip hop culture, and I was like, yo. He was like, no, it's all about you. I fucked your bitch. I'm like, no, that's this shit now. You don't know what shit was.
Right. He had no idea.
No idea. It was
right.
Experience.
And that's a whole nother podcast right there, right? I mean, when you start talking about all of that stuff, when you really know the history and you start looking deeper into how they changed the frequency in which music was recorded and all that shit, And then all of a sudden,
no, I didn't hear this. Oh no, don't do it.
Oh.
Don't do it. We're going
Okay.
left. We're going
Yeah,
hard.
okay, yeah.
You definitely come back. You definitely come back for another one. They change it because I'm aware of frequencies and sounds.
Yes.
You're gonna tell me they started altering the frequency. Oh, is this the 828 hertz Kanye was talking about?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, now I'm following
that. Yeah, some of it. I mean, because at the end of the day, just not to get too deep into it, but when you think about the bass drum itself, right? The boom, 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 right? Everybody relates to that because they spent 9 months in the womb listening to that, right? And when you start talking about ceremonial drum circles and everything else, everybody knows automatically. It doesn't matter what part of the continent you come from. Spirituality and ceremonies have to do with the drum beat, right? So now when the drum beat is hitting, it has no choice but to kind of open your heart. I mean, your heart is kind of open, doing to that. But then when you start putting negative incantations over the openness of the heart, now all of a sudden it's suggestive programming.
Wow.
Or something like that.
That's not, yeah. I mean, I did listen. There is just and to pull this into perspective for people that think this is one of the reasons I wanted to do this, and I want to talk about what you're doing. Is because it is for what some people think is out there. And when I took over Bulldog, which was the gym in Jersey, and I started training fighters, there were people that referred to as like, oh, you have like a cult, because I was doing affirmations. I was doing very low level shit, right? Just, like chakra movement, not even cleansing, just getting, but I was calling it like zone training. I took that from Paul Chek, he calls it zone. It's actually chakra. So anyway, it was, this past weekend, Jake Paul beat Mike Perry. Do you follow any of this at all?
I did. Only thing I heard about Jake Paul is that he was going to fight Mike Tyson.
Yeah, and then Mike Tyson had like a ulceratic something or whatever, and they dropped out. So this bare knuckle fighter who's pretty popular jumped in to box him. Well, I've been saying for a while, I was like 3 fights I've called that Paul's not going to lose. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, no. I was like, he's working with a coach that I kind of know of. Who, have you heard of Aubrey Marcus?
Yes.
Jake Paul's coach is Aubrey Marcus. He just doesn't
really
go to Aubrey Marcus's Instagram and you'll see Jake doesn't post it because that would break the perception of him being a dumb, stupid steroid, right? Like, no. He's been doing sound therapy before the fights with Aubrey Marcus before each fight. So if you go to Aubrey Marcus's Instagram, you'll see it because I've been sharing stuff about this with these guys for a while. So I know what you're saying with the sound stuff. Where did we go off on that? I don't want to go hard left on the rap music. Yeah, there's somebody talking about the rap culture. Wait, I'm almost rewinded back.
Well, with the rap culture, I know one of the things right away that stands out prominently is that, when we first started listening to it, there was, positive stuff, KRS-One, X-Clan, Public Enemy, it was all about affirmation and positive presentation of the culture. And then all of a sudden it changed to fuck the police, kill a bitch, fuck a motherfucker. I mean, and that's,
I don't. So here's my argument. I can remember I remember getting the first tape for NWA's Fuck the Police. Which was crazy because my dad was a cop. Like, you gotta understand that. I was like, do you understand? I know I got the outward look, but I was dedicated. I was speaking NWA's Fuck the Police with a dad who's a cop. Give me some points somewhere. I would have died. I would have been fucking basically rearranged, right? So I remember when it came out, and I always felt that up until the 90s, the rap, what was later termed gangster music, was fine. I don't know. I'm not ready to buy anything was changed because I do truly feel in the way that country music and really blues music became the outward expression of pain to a voice that nobody could hear, of a demographic that nobody wanted to hear. And I do think that I remember when it was right around like Biggie to Snoop to Dre, and then so you're talking about the 90s where it started to be becoming all materialistic. I'm okay with the violence because you had also at the same time Twisted Sister going before Congress, right? To say, we're only talking about it. It's an expression. If I paint a picture of people killing each other, that doesn't mean I'm going to kill somebody.
Right. You do it in movies all day. It's in the movies every day.
Yeah. And and I do believe that something happened where the genre, I do feel, became, like you said, like almost everything sounds the fucking same.
Yeah, hypersexual, hyper-violent, all those different things. Yeah.
And I don't like how people are like, yeah, but that's how it started. That's part of the problem. It shouldn't be like how it started. There should be an evolution. Yeah. One, none of those guys who made that fucking music are acting like that.
Nope.
Right? Like Ice Cube. Not only that, but they're all, well, no, I think, I think they were true to who they were when they were younger. But I think that when they got out, like when you see a good NFL athlete not blow his money, right? Like when you see a Shaq who's like, yeah, I played in the NBA, but I own 51 businesses, right? When you're like, oh shit, you really like, you right? Like Cube, Dog, Dre, they're all doing something positive, whether it's like I was watching something with the draft. There was like 2 or 3 kids in the draft that are all from that league that Snoop started. Like when you talk about what you did with the recruiting, like, I know maybe the Army wasn't the best answer, but for some kids, it was the only answer. Yep. And what they did with it from there was on them. But damn, at least I got them to
gave them the confidence to tackle life. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, hey, if I can get through this, then maybe I can get through that. And then after they get a few of those done, then they're like, oh, I can kind of get through a lot now.
Absolutely. It's the little victories that lead up to the big ones.
Yeah. So I all right. So I don't know where we lost it on hip hop culture. It was a guy I was sharing who was like, I'm like, dude, don't speak on something like don't speak on something you don't understand, because it does come from a pretty, especially like, I'm not a big fan of hard punk rock music. No. I really feel that's like, I'm like, but what was your favorite, since we're there, what was your favorite album? Because we're in the same music genre. Favorite album? Yeah, favorite in the hip hop genre.
During that time, coming up in LA, of course, I liked NWA. They were okay. But my favorite has always been DJ Quick. That's my guy.
Really?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah, I'm DJ Quick.
Not many people are gonna bold. Wow. See, I'm a standard, like, oddly enough, Biggie's my favorite. I think he just was the best lyricist. I think what we could have gotten. I think Tupac would have left music. If I have to go like, what if? I think Tupac would have left music. I think we would have went hardcore into the whole acting and maybe drop some stuff. But he was much more of a spoken poet.
Yeah, that's who he was to begin with. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
From day one,
what they blew him up to be was something that really wasn't in his heart to begin with. I mean, that guy, he's a perfect example of a guy who was out there living a gangster life, but never
got caught up.
That wasn't really him. I mean, dude went to a school for performing arts and shit. I mean, it's.
Well, this too is it was almost like, his mother. You're right. Do you know the story of his? So people don't know the story of his mother. She was one of the leaders of the Black Panthers. Was impregnated with him, pregnant in jail. Yeah. In jail for some of her actions as a leader. And I don't know did she give birth to him in jail? I forget, or she gave birth to him right after. But this was not. And then she came out and ran shit after. She didn't. You know what I'm saying? So it was like, I don't see, right? And you see some early tape of him. He's a little feminine. Yeah. Like he's at the Philly school, right? And I think his mom was taught him well enough to be like, and strong enough to be like, this is the role you need to play if you want to get out. Because ain't nobody giving you a fucking acting role. Right. But you know what they will give you? They'll worship you like a god. And I mean, still to this day, we consider him one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah, like, absolutely. I mean, it's all there. And something else just came to mind. We talk about some of those guys from that time frame. I mean, look at Ice-T, who came out with Cop Killer.
Yeah, Suicidal Tendencies.
And now all of a sudden he's been playing a cop for 20 years. Like
he made a joke about that. He said something. But do you think that's? I think that's the irony of life.
It is. I think it's the irony of life, but I also think that there's some other things in place that kind of control those movements as well. And that's a whole nother thing, about selling your soul in Hollywood and all that other kind of stuff. I mean, I believe that's real.
Oh, I listen, I not only do I believe it's real, but as we get close to wrapping up, I will say this, because I would love to have you back and we'll get into the political stuff.
Shit, yeah, man. I can talk about anything, man. And, let me say this before I forget. One of the great things about where I find myself now is that, we're having this conversation, we're kicking it back and forth about a myriad of different things. And that's who I am. I'm not some guy who thinks he's a fucking guru sitting on the top of the mountain telling everybody, you better get like me. No, I'm the guy who's out here living it just like you are, trying to get it and figure it out every single day. Do I have a very spiritual perspective? Is my perspective, made up of a lot of different things and different beliefs? Yeah, it is. But at the same time, man, I'm not trying to create no cult. All I'm trying to do is get people to tap back into who the fuck they are, and you can be who that is.
And I think you've heard of this term. Have you heard of the term Heyoka?
Yeah.
You are like a Heyoka, right? Because you're at, and I say this because I was introduced to that a couple of years ago. I worked for a company where the guy that was kind of developing the PT training philosophy donned himself as a Heyoka, and I was like, you can't be starting a corporate company and tell people you're going to lead them by letting them lead themselves, right? I'm like, this is hard. This is a hard fucking. This is hard. I got to put a marketing plan behind this shit and recruit people, and we're going to tell them, "What's my job? What do you think your job is to be?"
Yeah.
All right, dude.
About you tell us your job.
But it turned out that he was very flawed in his philosophy, which is a whole. Remember we talked about you end up at places where you're like, everyone thought this guy was the king, and I'm like, he's in fucking 30 seconds. I'm like, this is full of shit. The philosophy is full of shit, and I had to just eat it for months until I eventually exploded, dude. But a Heyoka is that Indian shaman or medicine man that helps you, in very simplistic terms, helps you find your way by inquisitively making you look inward.
That's it.
And the way that you've always approached things with me, where you'll check on me, spot on me, but you've never once, and I say this to everybody, no matter how powerful you think what you do is, and no matter how damaged you see I am, because it hasn't mistaken me. I say this all the time. I'm like, they want me to go down and do the bofu with them. And like, who's them? I'm like, all these military guys with PTSD. And so he's like, and they think you're fucked up too? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm pretty bad. I'm like, how would I tell them? What do I break down and tell them? But I do take
I'm honored you guys are considering, but does that mean I'm crazy too?
I was like, how crazy am I? Because I'm like, so you have never once, no matter how broken you think I am or how much you think I could be helped, you never once ever said anything more than you're 100% invited when you're ready. Never once, hey man, John, hey, did you think about it? Hey man, how you been doing? You thinking about it? When you stop with your own shit? Like none of that Goggins shit, none of that. You've just always been that steady. Maybe I'll get a text once in a while. Hey man, you good? Like the right. But other than that, and I tell this to people that are listening, never once has he ever been in that way. So you really speak to that shaman type Heyoka philosophy of, hey man, I'm here. And if you ask me, I'm going to help you. And I know, like, and I'm not saying I'm the best, but I know my way, and my way might help you. And maybe that's it. But I've always said this to people, like, maybe try it my way, and it might open up 4 more of your ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's exactly what happens here. I mean, so to the point of what happens when folks come down, we're looking at it. It's a 5-day retreat. I've also recently started doing a 30-day residential program as well for folks who need some individual type of healing. But just for the 5-day retreat, you come down. The very first thing that we're going to do is we're going to all meet up in Tucson. So the trip really starts there, right? So, bonding together and getting in the van and riding down and getting to know who you're with and all of that. So the very first day when you come down, we do a sweat lodge together. Everybody who's there on the trip will, and that's the other thing about this endeavor is that it's peer supported and it's peer led. Right now, me myself, I've been down there with the Sari for more than 3.5 years. I did the initiation rites and I did my time in the cave, and I serve medicine in the same way that they do. However, when I bring people down there, I'm not serving. It's not about me. It's about them coming down there, but they have this experience with the indigenous people on their land, right? So I don't serve anybody.
Please say that again, because this was something I forgot to say in the beginning that I do rave about. Remember we talked about there's always these people out there trying to bullshit this.
Yeah.
Even though you have, quote unquote, the credentials, you've passed the test, you're still not doing it. You're not serving. You're not performing the ceremony. And I think this is what blows me away. This is what my biggest interest in doing this with you is you're doing it with the indigenous people in their land, not at the not somebody who's a derivative native who then you're going to say, well, we're going to bring you on campus. Do you know what I mean? Like this is some serious shit. Right. And it's deep, but man, I just repeat that again. I want to make sure
man, I don't. I mean, again, when I went down there for the very first time, I was going down there on the information that this tribe was pretty much the only ones who worked with that medicine. Now, since I've been down there over the last, 3.5, 4 years, I've come to find out that that's not 100% true. But there's other folks that have worked with the medicine, and also their historical lineage to it doesn't go back as far as most people would think it would either. However, in terms of what they do with the medicine now, they are certainly the guardians of this medicine in the Sonoran Desert. And they have put together, some healing songs and cantos and energy work and everything that goes along with this medicine and makes it a beautiful experience for anybody who comes there. The rite of passage, I guess you could call it, or initiation type of thing that it was done. It was on the island. It was there's an island out there called Isla Tiburon, and that's where this particular tribe of people lived at originally. It was that island plus the inland. Their territory went all the way up close to the border of into California. But this particular tribe, as history goes, they were one of the only tribes in the region who were able to fend off the advances of the conquistadors and to keep their own language and culture. So this tribe down there, they speak their own dialect that's not spoken anywhere else in the world. So for them, Spanish is actually a second language, and it's a very, very intact culture, and the history of it is so amazing in terms of up until 1927, less than 100 years ago, the Mexican government had deemed them all to be witches and warlocks, and you were able to turn one of their scalps in for pay because of this tribe was practicing the old ways, right?
Wow.
So up until 1927. So with that being said, they've always been very, very kind of leery of outsiders and everything else, right? Because of the way that they were treated by the Mexican government and by the Spaniards, to begin with. These particular folks, again, it's a very modest and humble life that they live there on that reservation. The reservations here in Mexico are not set up like they are in the U.S. In the U.S., you have the Bureau of Indian Affairs and, Bureau of Land Management, all these different agencies who at least halfway act like they care about the indigenous. But down here, you don't have anything like that. It's just whatever they can get, right? So when I came down here again, I don't know if I had touched on this, but I came down just with the intention to learn the medicine with these folks if they would accept me. First, I came down with the number one intention of doing more work on myself, because I knew that I was going to be involved in this medicine some kind of way. But I also knew that if I was going to learn it, it needed to be from an indigenous source or somebody who was credible. It wasn't going to be the guy who served me up in Phoenix. He's a good dude and all that, but it wasn't his to teach. And that's the bottom line. Right. So I went, with these folks, and the very first time that I went down there, my intention was to just do a lot more work on myself. So I went a week and a half. I just packed all my shit in the car, had no idea where I was going, put in the GPS Punta Sueca. I had quit my job a couple of months before, and I was like, I'm doing this, man. Let's go. And I went down there, and for that I stayed a week and a half the very first time with the guy who would eventually become my medicine mentor. That was Luis Miguel Lopez. And I spent, like 12 days there the first time and just did copious amounts of bufo. I mean, we were doing bufo 3 or 4 times a day and sometimes at night. And, and that's because what I told him when I got there was that I wanted to just dig deep into exactly who I was and what this whole thing was all about. And he just looked at me and he said, okay.
We'll see.
Like, okay. And the other notion there, John, was that I knew that I was going to help people go forward with this thing, but I also knew that, in the time that I had spent, looking at different medicine communities, just in 6 months up there in Phoenix, I ran into so many different douchebags and people that were, just, I don't know what the fuck some of them folks got going on, man. They go out and change their names and shit. I'm Jason Moondust, or I gotta go to such and such
come to Florida.
Online shamanism academy, all this bullshit.
Come over to Florida.
Oh, I know it's out of control there,
bro. It is so out of control here.
Yep.
And it's tough too, because for me, being in the holistic space for a while, and I really consider myself like gray holistic space. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I definitely use holistic modalities for my own personal self-advancement. Not always for elevation of self, but just look shredded. And organic food makes you look more shredded. I don't know what to tell you, but right. So, but like I know where you've got so much of this here in Florida, but it's hard because when I see a younger person And I'm like, I know you're mouthing these things. I know you don't fucking know what you're talking about.
Right.
How do I shit on you for it? Like, how do I aptly be like, listen, no, go through 10 years of trauma. Then you're going to come out and like you got to go to the darkness to get to the light. But
yeah, that's the
hard.
thing. I mean, what I've seen happen, bro, is that so there's a lot of people that are, you know, semi well resourced or whatever else, right? And a lot of times it's these people that find these modalities, right? So now all of a sudden you've got somebody who's had 3 or 4 beautiful ayahuasca journeys, and all of a sudden they want to be a shaman.
Yeah.
And like, okay, now I'm Shaman Susie now because I've got 3 ayahuasca tours under my belt, and now I'm going to help everybody else and charge them $1,000 while I do it. You know, there's a lot of that out there.
Like what you said, you could easily like learn from the guy in Phoenix or wherever you right. But it's like, that's what happens here in Florida. It's like, you see, that's like one of the reasons I've always pointed to Paul Chek. He comes up like in every podcast, but this guy, Paul Chek, is that he is, I believe he's at the level of being a shaman, but he doesn't do any of the practices to anyone. It's for his journey. And he's done it all with the Native Americans in his area of California. You know what I mean? Like, but he still doesn't. So he teaches the best holistic course I've ever seen. His holistic life coach is there's nothing even close to it, and it's also very affordable. But the base at the end of it is this guy who could be peddling a shaman course to the fucking world, and he's got the distribution channels, and he's, you know what I mean. But he does it, and there's very few people like you, like him, that are not, you know, and that's what drives me nuts in here in Florida. Is it's like, right, this is going to sound horrible, but I'm just going to say it out loud. If I go to like a Bofu ceremony, or I go to a mushroom ceremony, or I go to any ceremonies and the dude's white and he looks like me, I'm like, come on.
What are we doing here?
I'm like, all right, listen, I'm calling
it is what it is. You know, that's not to say that there's not some great folks out there that happen to be white this time doing the work, you know, because
listen,
there's some, you know,
agreed. I don't agree, but this is not, it's more what you said before. They're very well resourced. They got all addicted to some other drug, which I'm glad you got out of that drug, but now it's like you got bailed out, you went to rehab. Now you're doing, what's the other one that fucking they're doing? I ran into cacao. No, kava.
And another one that I see frequently abused is hape. You know, the rape.
Yes.
Like man, I know people right now that I could tell you, I can give you a list of 10 names of these folks. They're like, they'll tell you, yeah, you know, since I've been on the medicine path, I quit smoking, you know, but then they're doing rape every 10 minutes, you know.
Which is caffeine, right? It's a caffeine base, right?
Yes, it's tobacco based. I mean, rapes come in a lot of different, you know, varieties, but at the end of the day, it's like tobacco. It's so if you're telling me you no longer smoke cigarettes, then okay, that's great, but now you're doing tobacco through your nose every 10 minutes. Like,
see, I have a similar issue in the health and fitness, in the health and fitness space, where people that were former like alcoholics. Yeah. And again, this is a sensitive matter because I don't, you know, I've had alcoholism in my family, and I've faced it, and I understand very much the complexity. So it's not to make light of it, but I try to make people aware of the fact that you can't trade one addiction for another. Right. And steroids and looking good is a really slippery slope of being like, that's why people are like, why are you? It's like, I'm not that I'm against steroids. It's not that I don't think a man should or could, or do I think anything down upon it, especially if he's led a different life and he's 30, 40 years old and his natural T is down and he's using it under, like, even if you're using it recreationally to right, because we all know medical community is a fucking nightmare to get things done. If you're not an athlete, you're not competing against, it's not against your sport. Those are where I have an issue with it. The other area I have an issue with it is that when you're trying to predicate that you're automatically healthier because you're shredded and ripped, and gym is your therapy, because you can look in the mirror and be like, I look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I believe this, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'll say it, is the golden calf of our world.
Yeah.
He cheated to get the fuck where even Mr. Olympia was a cheat. He broke the rules, and his reward was governor, movie, president's council of exercise. So all you learned from his was that if you just can propagate the lie long enough, you win.
You win.
Hard work. And if you could propagate why did we strip Lance Armstrong of every fucking title? He started a cancer foundation. If anybody took something negative and was like, fuck, I kind of lied to everybody, but I'll take a few million and help some kids with cancer. Schwarzenegger started another bodybuilding show that just promoted the lie longer. And it drives me nuts when people in my field are like, oh, Schwarzenegger, go fuck him. I have zero interest, wouldn't even want to meet him.
Yeah.
But
I think also at the end of the day, if you could insert X industry, whatever industry you want, and it's going to kind of have a similar story. You fake it as long as you need to, and follow the rules when you need to, and take all commands from the tower, and then don't ask any questions, and you'll be good.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, there's only 1 to 5% that are good. The rest get slaughtered as the fodder for that, right?
Yeah.
And I just, let me say this as we broke 2 hours, which is awesome. I appreciate it. Yeah, that was quick. I will say this, and it was a shame because we'll definitely have to definitely bring you on, and we'll start with this because I want to talk more about what your journey was like and get people to understand, because one of the things with Chad and I've tried to tell people is we're in this revolution where we're trying to get people to understand that, not just Bofu or ayahuasca or psilocybin or ketamine or like these are let's start. We got to do something better, not only for people, but for veterans. Right. And now we need to start exploring things. And I think getting back to roots of cultures and civilizations, like what you're doing, where it's not some certification. We're doing it in Miami because I've got oh my God, screw Earth and its material things while you're on a fucking high rise and behind you is like a Miami apartment, right?
Exactly. And how much is it to do a session with you, by the way? Oh, $1,000. Oh, okay. Well, damn, I guess I can't afford healing.
Yeah. That was the thing too. I loved about how you are working with veterans that don't have the financial resources all the time, and you're getting them out there one way or another. You're getting them out there, and that's what Mike has always said. Just tell them when they're done with their shit, call me. We'll get them out here. We'll make it work. And you're a problem solver, and I love that. So, let's wrap up with how people can get a hold of you.
Yeah.
Let's give all the details on that. How they get a hold of you, where they can reach you, where they can read up on you.
Okay.
Read up on
Perfect. Let me tell you real quick what we offer. We offer the 5-day retreats, Temazcal, Kambo, Changa, and then 2 days of Bufo. And then we put together a 30-day residential program. The residential program entails you coming down. You're going to go see a doctor first. We're going to do a physical, do some labs. We're going to do that before we start the 30 days. And we're going to do it again at the end of the 30 days. During that 30 days, we're going to change your diet. We're going to put something there specific for your blood type and all that kind of stuff. And we're going to start off with a basic meditation instruction, breath work, sound healing, the sweat lodge, and then the combo, which are all purification processes. And then for the last 2 weeks, then you'll be on your whatever your prescribed medicine journey is, because a lot of folks don't need to start off in the Bufo space. Maybe they need to start with ayahuasca, or maybe they need to start with mushrooms, maybe peyote, whatever thing is out there. We've got facilitators here in Mexico that are dedicated to that. I don't have a bunch of posers that do this stuff on the weekend. I got the real deal people that come down here and do this as a way of life and as a matter of their lineage. Right. So that's part of the difference there. But that's the way that you can get a hold of us. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. We're also at www.healingfrontlineheroes.org. We're there as well. The treatments and the retreat specials are for veterans. We find out a way to make it happen for free, no matter what. I will always make that happen. And to that point, that's been kind of like we were talking about earlier. The willingness to help others and put yourself out there. Hey, it hasn't always worked out. I've been getting my ass kicked a long time, but it's
yeah. But it is, man. One thing that you and Chad inspired me, because I'll end with this. When very few people would have called to check on me, and you guys did when I was down here in Florida, was yeah, we get our butt kicked, but we like to fight. We like
I'm okay with it.
We don't want to do it all the time. We like to take a break, but we you can't beat someone who enjoys the fight.
Yeah, there's a part of me that does thrive in the chaos still.
Yeah, and as long as I think like you found that nice balance where you know where you can like how much you can give to the chaos and how much you need to pull back.
Yeah.
And I think that's great. The thing about the veterans too, it's very important because especially the last couple of years that I was working with fighters, like I said, I've come into contact with a lot more vets, and then working with RoofCon, there's a lot of veterans in the roofing business. So it's been very apparent to me over the years that many veterans just really feel like there's just no maybe there's just not help, or like maybe there's help, but I got to fill out a form and it'll be next month or it'll be $1,000. Like when Mike says we will figure it the fuck out, he means we will figure it out. Just call him. Just when you're done with the bullshit and you're ready to go, DM him, call him. The last thing I'll mention, because I keep bringing up RoofCon, is on October 23rd, 24th, 25th. We're doing a table for Mental Joe, which is an organization that when they sell t-shirts, hats like this we're wearing, the money will go to an organization like Mike's to help offset those costs when he's giving out free help or help sponsor. So if you're, that's one of the reasons I want to do that is that's a whole roofing industry event. So we feel there's going to be a lot of vets there that are doing well.
Absolutely.
That will be like, hey, I want to give back and help some of the guys that maybe aren't doing as well. Or there's a lot of vets that are out there. I noticed this when I went to this retreat out in Utah. There's the cool thing about this men's group is they were really there for each other, where because there was different ages, and they were like, listen, man, I've been through shit that breaks most people. So I've been there and I've been broken, and I'm here when you get broken. I'm here for you to lean on.
That's it, and that's the special thing, about what we're doing here is that it is peer led, and you are sitting across from guys who absolutely have been exactly where you are at right now. Guys who are willing to jump in there and do ceremony with you. I mean, shit, I do end up doing a lot of medicine because I jump in there with the folks. I mean, one thing I learned about leadership is that you don't ever ask anybody to do anything you're not willing to do yourself. Right. So always lead from the front. That's been the thing. And part of our slogan here is repurposed warriors. Right. Because, again, we've all been the warrior types, one way or the other, whether it was through athletics or on the battlefield or whatever else. We all have that warrior spirit in us. But I think, something that came up in the conversation earlier that I wanted to touch on is like, okay, what does the old warrior do? Right. I mean, think about the spirituality of the samurai. Right. Those guys were being a warrior is a very spiritual thing. Anything short of that is being a soldier. The difference between a soldier and a warrior is that the soldier is told how to fight, when to fight, what to wear. He's given his rules of engagement. He's given all of those things. And there's no questioning that, right? Unless you just want to. But then when you make the evolution to the warrior chooses his own battles. The warrior chooses his own method of battle. The warrior chooses what things he's going to get involved in and all of that, right? So there's a spiritual evolution that must take place. When the samurai gets old and it's time for him to put down the sword, now he's a teacher, right? Yeah. And the philosophy of inner discipline and connection to something higher than yourself, this is the root of all great warriors. Even if we go back to the Vikings, I mean, they all had something they believed in, right? Yeah,
they all had. Yeah, they were. Nobody was out there conquering lands and fighting free or fighting seas and traveling and dealing with disease because they were bored, right? There was always a higher calling, and that's something we're off the sidebar too, because I started getting into a lot of the history of the Vikings and the berserkers and how they used a certain specific. I'm going to butcher the name. I forget Cimmerian, certain type of mushroom.
Okay.
That they would eat, and then that was actually what now they're believing was the genesis of their berserker rage and the lack of zero fear to go into these things. So, but one parting question, because I always ask this of every guest.
Yes.
One book, either a book that was a major turning point in your life, or the one book right now you're reading that anyone should read. Either one.
So many different ones, but the one that comes to mind right away is called Awareness, and it's by a guy named Anthony DeMello. It's called Awareness, and this guy is a former Jesuit priest who eventually turned back to just spirituality, but it talks about a lot of things in there in terms of our consciousness and the things that happen in our life to develop the same. So it's called Awareness, and that was a really good one there. And then, of course,
who's the author? Awareness by who?
Anthony DeMello.
Okay. All right, my friend. I always like to post. I don't know why it's my thing. Whenever I would travel, I meet interesting people. I always ask them like, "What was the book that made you change in this path?" And it's funny because they'll run and like pull the book off and give it to me. And I have a stack of books. Like I have a couple books that I was like, I promised, like I have to go back when I travel back again, like return.
Mm-hmm.
But man, this has been great. I thank you so much for this. Thank you for your service. Thank you for everything you did.
Thank you, brother. Yeah.
Thank you for everything you're doing now. Thank you. I got to write a list of things to say thank you. Your time today.
Oh man, it's all good. I'm just a guy who was lucky enough to figure out why the fuck he's here. That's it.
Yeah, I love when you say that. And that rung. I think that rung good to it, my friend. And I'm really hoping he calls you because that was the thing when you said to me, like, man, I was just a guy lucky enough to know my purpose. That's a damn lucky thing to do is to know your purpose. So, Michael, Healing Frontline Heroes, thank you so much, my friend. I'm gonna don't hang up.
Right.
I'm gonna hit and record. I gotta like pull some audio from your side.
Okay.
But, for the people out there, this will be the end. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, brother.
Take care,
Appreciate
brother.
you, man. We got this.